You and your child aren't cute at all. Get out of this house right now, my mother-in-law yelled. Huh? This house says that. I paused, confused. Understood, I said, and I started packing my things. My husband, Matt, looked surprised and worried as he watched me. Hey, you don't have to leave like that. But your dear mother told me to leave. I have to follow, don't I? I replied. Matt, don't waste your time with her. Come here and let's have cake, my mother-in-law said smugly, clearly proud of herself. I silently made up my mind. I would leave, take my daughter, and go back to my parents' house. My name is Jennifer. I'm 34 years old and work in an office. I married Matthew 2 years ago. We met on a popular dating app and became a couple after a year of dating. My husband, Matt, is kind and caring, but a little unreliable. When we were dating, he would plan fun dates and find restaurants I liked. After we got married, he helped with chores and brought me my favorite desserts when I was tired. A year after getting married, we had a lovely daughter, and Matt was very involved in taking care of her. I thought I had found a wonderful husband, but, of course, nobody is perfect. One of Matt's biggest flaws is that he's a mama's boy. At first, I noticed it when he talked about food. How's the food? I asked. It's good, but my mom's was a bit richer, he replied. I was surprised that he suddenly brought up his mother. As we talked more, it became clear that he thought his mom's cooking was the best, and he wanted me to cook like her. So, I tried making the dishes richer, just like he liked. Even when we went on trips, Matt would ask, what should I buy for my mom as a souvenir? I thought it was strange he only mentioned his mom, even though his dad was also around. Wouldn't it be more normal to say, what should we get for my parents? But no, it was always about his mom. At first, I thought it was sweet that he cared about his mother. After all, many men are mama's boys. But soon, I realized that his attachment to his mom was far beyond normal. I think we should live with my mom, my husband said out of nowhere. Wait, what? Why all of a sudden? I asked, surprised. It seems like my mom and dad are getting divorced, he explained. What, really? Yeah, apparently it's because my dad cheated, he added. I was shocked. My father-in-law always seemed like such a nice guy, but I guess you can't judge a book by its cover. It's sad to leave my mom alone, my husband continued, and if we live together, she can help take care of our daughter. That made sense. I was on parental leave, and with my mother-in-law's help, I could return to work sooner, but I was also a bit worried. My mother-in-law liked me, but would we get along if we lived together? I shared my concerns with my husband, and he reassured me, don't worry, it'll be fine. My mom was praising you, Jennifer. Hearing that made me feel better, and I thought maybe we could get along living together. However, I quickly realized how naive I had been. When my mother-in-law moved into our apartment, her attitude completely changed. She suddenly started being rude. I can't believe you get to live in such a nice apartment. It's so annoying, she said. Huh? Don't forget that you have this life thanks to my son, she yelled. I didn't understand why she was so angry, but I quietly replied, well, Matthew works hard and helps with chores, so I'm grateful. Her response wasn't totally wrong, so I just said, yes, I'll keep that in mind. At least you're obedient. That's good, she said. From then on, she would get mad at me over the smallest things. Why are you using soy sauce on the fried eggs? You're supposed to use sauce. The bath is lukewarm. Make it hotter next time. Why isn't there any ice cream after my bath? You should always have some ready. She barely did any housework even though she was home all day. I had hoped she would help more with our 1-year-old daughter, But she only did it when she felt like it and lost interest quickly. Living together was much harder than I expected. I realized that my mother-in-law's overprotectiveness toward her son was even worse than Matthew's attachment to her. "Matthew, how was work today?" she asked. "It was tough. My boss was on edge because we were so busy, so I had to be careful," Matthew explained. "Oh my, that's unforgivable. Should I protest to your company for allowing this power harassment?" Really? Over that?" Matthew looked surprised. "It's okay, Mom. We have to forgive and be patient," he said. "Oh, what a kind child you are. Just like an angel," she exclaimed. It felt strange to hear her call a grown man in his 30s an angel. "Thanks, Mom. But if things get worse, I'll ask for your help," Matthew replied. "Of course," she said, eagerly. It was ridiculous that she was ready to fight his battles at work, all based on his mood. I regretted agreeing to live with her and felt like I might go crazy if I stayed in the house all the time. So, I decided to put my daughter in daycare and return to work. When I told my mother-in-law, she got angry. "Why do you have to work too?" she snapped. I replied, "But you can enjoy having the house to yourself, right?" It seemed like she liked the idea, so she just said, "Don't neglect your housework," and didn't get any angrier. Dealing with her was exhausting because I never knew what would upset her. Luckily, my stress levels went down once I started working and spent less time with her, but about a year after we started living together, a new problem came up. It was my daughter's second birthday. We had a small party with cake and gifts. But my daughter had entered the terrible twos, and her mood swings were at their peak during the party. "Come on, here's a present. Open it," my mother-in-law said, handing her a gift. "No," my daughter shouted, pushing the present away. My mother-in-law was surprised by my daughter's reaction, but she held back her anger, thinking the cake might cheer her up. She scooped some up with a fork and tried to feed her. "Here's your favorite shortcake," she said. But again, my daughter said, "No," and swatted the cake away. The cream flew and landed right on my mother-in-law's forehead. "That was it," my short-tempered mother-in-law snapped. She shouted at my 2-year-old, "Enough. You're acting out because I've been nice to you." Startled, my daughter burst into tears. "What are you doing? She's just a child," I said as I quickly hugged my daughter to comfort her. "Shut up. What an unlovable grandchild," my mother-in-law spat. "Well, you're an immature grandmother," I shot back. "What did you say?" she yelled. It was shocking. No adult should talk to a toddler like that. "Shut up. You're such a disrespectful daughter-in-law. Can't you fix that attitude of yours?" she screamed. As we argued, my husband finally joined in, but instead of defending us, he sided with his mom. "You should be protecting your daughter, not hiding behind your mother," I said angrily. "We can always have more kids, but I only have one mom," he said. I couldn't believe my ears. That's the worst thing I've ever heard. What a horrible thing to say. "Hey, don't talk bad about Matthew," my mother-in-law cut in. "Neither you nor your child are cute. Get out of this house." I stopped myself mid-sentence. This house," I began but then paused. "Understood," I said calmly, and I started packing my things. My husband looked flustered and said, "Hey, you don't have to leave." "But your precious mother told me to." "Right, I must obey," I said coldly. "Matthew, don't waste time with her. Come eat cake with me," my mother-in-law said, smiling smugly. That was the last straw. I silently vowed to stand up for myself, took my daughter, and left to go back to my parents' house. I ignored the several calls from my husband and focused on what I needed to do. I prepared the divorce papers and sent them to him. He filled them out and sent them back, so I submitted them to the city office right away. Then, I called my now ex-husband. I submitted the divorce papers, so thanks for filling them out. Yeah, so me and my mom can keep living in this apartment. Right, you left on your own, he said. Sure, as long as you pay the rent, I replied. Of course, this was the apartment you rented, so I was worried when you left, but I figured I just need to change the lease to my name. Thanks for providing a comfortable place for me and my mom. I'm glad it worked out, I said. By the way, how much is the rent? Well, let's say about 150,000 yen, I said. What? What are you talking about? Tell me the actual rent. Don't joke around, he snapped. I'm not joking. That's because I'm the owner of the apartment. What? We talked about it when we got married. Remember? I made a lot of money in stocks a while ago and bought this apartment. You must have just assumed it was a rental. Matthew went quiet, clearly shocked. If you can't afford the 150,000 yen rent, I'll just sell the place. The apartment will sell quickly. Wait. If you sell it, where will my mom and I live? I don't care. You better leave quickly, or I'll report you to the management company. With that, I hung up, blocked his number, and later demanded child support through my lawyer. According to the lawyer, Jennifer's ex-husband looked tired and worn out. It must be hard for him, both mentally and financially, to pay child support while also supporting his mother. His mother even came with him to the negotiations, and the two of them spent the whole time blaming each other. It's your fault, they kept saying. Their close relationship, which had seemed so annoying before, fell apart quickly when they lost their comfortable lifestyle. Maybe their bond wasn't as strong as it seemed, but that wasn't Jennifer's problem anymore. On the other hand, Jennifer sold the apartment for a surprisingly high price. She saved all the money for her daughter's future and now works hard while living with her parents. She hopes to find love again someday, but for now, her main focus is earning as much as she can for her daughter. She also promises herself not to be overbearing or intrusive in her daughter's life, like her former mother-in-law had been. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.
Megan Van held her breath. She was crafting a delicate chocolate butterfly to adorn her cake. Decorating desserts was the confectioner's favourite part. She poured her heart into it. Megan worked with jeweller-like precision, transforming the cake into a culinary masterpiece. "Megan!" The sharp, impatient voice of her husband rang out from the bedroom. "Megan!" The sudden shout startled Megan, causing her hand to twitch. The chocolate decoration cracked, and the butterfly lost a wing. "Damn!" she muttered, frowning. Setting aside the ruined figurine, she called back, "What is it?" "I'm starving!" her spouse yelled. "When's dinner? You're making cakes again. Think about my stomach, not someone else's." Megan closed her eyes and took a deep breath, slowly counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Well, Megan!" The man's voice pierced her thoughts again. "Where's the food? I want lasagna or fettuccine. No, better lasagna. Megan, do you hear me?" Sighing, Megan stored the remaining decorations in the refrigerator, planning to return to the cake later. She knew her husband wouldn't leave her in peace. Lately, the phrase, "all men are like children," kept recurring in Megan's mind. After all, Jack, her husband, behaved like a capricious toddler. Judging by his antics, Jack had recently turned 2, at most. "Megan?" Jack wailed again. "I'm coming," she shouted back, trying to mask her irritation. In truth, Megan felt ashamed of her thoughts and anger. Her husband wasn't merely being difficult. He genuinely couldn't walk. Megan vividly remembered that terrible day and the phone call that divided her life into before and after. She had been baking a honey cake to order when the phone rang. Seeing an unfamiliar number, Megan assumed it was a customer, so she answered and put it on speaker to continue working. "Hello," Megan said cheerfully, opening the oven to retrieve a golden brown cake layer. "Megan Van?" A man's voice came through, introducing himself. "Police Sergeant Brian Gardner." Megan snorted, initially assuming it was another scammer. She thought he'd probably start talking about loans or bank fraud, but she couldn't dismiss the caller because she had already donned oven mitts and grabbed the hot baking pan. "I'm calling to inform you that your spouse Jack has been in a traffic accident. He's been taken to the city hospital." Megan's world spun. She snapped out of her shock when the baking tray crashed to the floor, shattering the cake. The policeman continued speaking, but the woman barely registered his words. Megan vaguely recalled grabbing the phone and asking for the hospital address to be repeated. She scribbled it with trembling fingers on a scrap of paper, then, hastily turning off the oven, rushed to the medical centre. At the hospital, she learned the horrifying details that seemed like a scene from the movie Final Destination. Jack had been driving on the highway behind a logging truck. The trailer had detached and veered into oncoming traffic, scattering logs along the way. Jack's car struck the scattered logs and overturned, then collided with the trailer. When Megan saw photos from the accident scene, she couldn't suppress a terrified scream. The husband's car was reduced to a heap of metal. The ambulance took the victim away in an unconscious state. Until Megan saw the doctor, she involuntarily imagined the worst. However, by some miracle, Jack escaped with only internal bruises and several fractures. "The main thing is that the head is intact," the surgeon tried to joke, touching the woman's shoulder. "The rest we've already patched up." Megan's heart sank, and tears sprang from her eyes, this time from relief. She had no idea that there were still difficulties ahead. Jack was discharged from the hospital after 3 weeks. He was in a cast and wheelchair-bound, but most importantly, alive. "I'm confident he'll walk on his own, even without crutches, but I can't give 100% guarantee yet," the doctor said as he saw the patient off. "For now, he should move as little as possible." Megan nodded, relieved to have her spouse back. However, as they say, the good times didn't last long. Jack's character deteriorated terribly. Aggression, resentment, temper and capriciousness awakened in him. Jack seemed especially depressed by the fact that Megan officially became the head of the family, although she had been carrying everything on her shoulders before. The fact was that Jack couldn't return to work, receiving only meagre disability payments. Fortunately, a year before the accident, Megan had started baking cakes. She had stumbled upon a popular blogger on the internet who baked cakes and cupcakes to order, earning good money. Megan thought, why can't I do that? At first, Megan combined baking with her main job as a schoolteacher. However, she soon left the school because she simply couldn't take it anymore. She was emotionally burned out, exhausted from the workload, buried in paperwork, and the salary was pitiful. Megan's decision wasn't appreciated by her mother-in-law or her husband. They both tried to guide Megan back to the right path. "Being a teacher is a noble profession. Can't you handle it?" Jack's mother grumbled. "And you need an official salary. Otherwise, how will you get a pension?" "If I stay in school, I won't live to see my pension," Megan joked grimly. She didn't listen to her mother-in-law's advice. Only her best friend Daphne supported her new hobby, and it was Daphne who first bought Megan's chocolate cake, insisting on full payment. Then she spread the word and helped her friend create a social media page. Soon, Megan had so many orders that even her mother-in-law fell silent. Eventually, Megan and Jack were able to take out a mortgage and move out of their rented accommodation. It was paid mainly by Megan. Jack earned a not-too-good salary, but he covered only the utilities. The rest of his earned money he spent on himself, especially on computer games, which Megan couldn't understand. However, the woman was so passionate about her business and personal growth that she failed to notice the red flags in their relationship. Now that Jack was completely in a cast, only Megan's cakes provided for them. However, work became more challenging every week as Jack began to demand all of his wife's attention. Megan tolerated her husband's whims, understanding how difficult it was for him. She looked after him as if he were a child. Jack, however, did not appreciate it. He would become angry if his spouse sought a brief distraction by meeting a friend or leaving the house on business.
"You want to leave me alone?"
He looked at her reproachfully like a helpless puppy.
"Don't you remember what happened last time?"
And last time had been a real disaster, by Jack and his mother's standards. Megan, deciding she'd go crazy if she didn't get some air, had gone to the candy store. She didn't make it as she received a call from her husband.
"I'm bleeding! There's blood everywhere!"
He yelled into the phone. A pale Megan turned the car around and rushed back home. Then she saw her husband sucking his finger. There was a shallow cut on it. It turned out that the man had wanted a sandwich, but had failed in his attempt. "That's it?" Megan was stunned. She couldn't bite her tongue. Jack looked at her resentfully, as if Megan had personally pulled out a machete and slashed him. She had to generously pour hydrogen peroxide on the finger of the sufferer, blow on the cut, and then wrap it with several layers of bandages so that the child calmed down. Daphne, hearing such news, whistled. "You burned your hand with caramel this summer, but finished the wedding cake, and he threw a tantrum because of a scratch. You've gotten him used to the sweet life." Megan only sighed, and then listened to the reproaches of her mother-in-law, who claimed that Megan, a careless fool, had left her husband alone. "You know, I didn't think that a 30-year-old man couldn't be trusted with a knife and sausage," Megan finally retorted. However, now, when the man whined that he was again abandoned to his fate, Megan sighed, pulled off her jacket, and called Daphne to say that she wouldn't come. She devoted another evening to taking care of the discharged hospital ward. It seemed to worsen. The expression on his face became more miserable, and he took more pills. Megan's mother-in-law visited them often. Taking advantage of the moment, Jack's mother conducted an audit of the hostess's fridge, criticising her for cooking an insufficient number of dishes. When she noticed that Megan was freezing ready-made dishes so that she wouldn't have to waste time on cooking later, she grabbed her head. "My Jack needs good nutrition to get on his feet. And what? Are there just cakes in your refrigerator?" Megan clenched her teeth and swallowed the words that these cakes were the only source of income for their family. A month passed, followed by a second. The man was able to move around the house on his own, but the cast had not been removed. Problems with Jack only increased. Jack refused to warm his own food, preferring to shout throughout the apartment that he was hungry. He was impatient and waited for Megan to drop everything and run to feed him. At least he didn't insist on spoon-feeding him. Once Megan, unable to stand it, threw it in her husband's face. "I've prepared everything and put it in containers. Can't you go and warm it up?" Jack then took great offence. "You don't care about me," he grumbled, shaming his spouse. "If you were sick, I wouldn't leave your bedside." Megan mentally scoffed, remembering her operation. The man hadn't even bothered to pick her up after the hospital, telling her to take a cab. In the end, Daphne took care of her friend. She also prepared food in advance so that her friend could rest, following the doctor's instructions. But even then, Jack still demanded attention and a hot dinner for a man tired from work. And now, on top of everything, Jack started leaving a mess everywhere. He constantly scattered crumbs around the house and threw things wherever he pleased. Megan found wet towels, dirty laundry, napkins and chip packages all over the house. She tried to hint that her husband might benefit from making an extra trip to the trash can. However, he didn't listen. Jack spent all day watching TV or playing online games with his friends. 3 months after the accident, the man seemed to feel better, yet he still relied heavily on his wife. Despite his poor condition and the cast on his leg, Jack didn't miss the chance to meet his friends at the summer house for Frankie's birthday, Jack's best friend. The man could not miss such an event. Megan let him go willingly, feeling only relief. She spent a peaceful weekend. She met with Daphne and went shopping, for the first time in months, spending time and money on herself rather than her husband's whims. On Sunday evening, friends returned Jack, literally carrying the drunken man into the apartment. "Accept the package, hostess," laughed the equally drunk birthday boy. Jack fell asleep immediately. Megan went to the kitchen to finish a late-night order, a set of trifles she had promised to deliver to the customer's office herself. Unfortunately, things weren't going smoothly. The cream had separated, and the first cake hadn't risen. The determined confectioner stayed in the kitchen to perfect the layered desserts in glasses. When Megan finished and, tired but satisfied with the result, got ready for bed, dawn was already breaking. It seemed her head had barely touched the pillow when the phone demanded she get up. Jack, who had slept well but was now hung over, made the same demand.
"Megan, Megan,"
he moaned gravely, barely opening his swollen eyes.
"I need some water and aspirin, quickly."
Only after getting water and a tablet did the man demand breakfast.
"My stomach's grumbling. What delicious thing do we have today?"
Megan glanced at her watch. "Listen, I promised the customer I'd bring desserts to the office by the start of the workday," she said. "He's some company head who wants to treat his colleagues. I think it's their company's birthday or something. Why don't you make your own breakfast? Warm up the pasta I cooked for dinner last night." Jack frowned and breathed heavily.
"What? Pasta for breakfast? I haven't been home for 3 days, and this is how you greet me, running off at once. I see you didn't miss me. It's easier for you without me, isn't it? Am I a burden to you?" He began to grumble. Megan barely restrained herself from rolling her eyes. "Calm down, Jack. I'm not going for a walk. I'm going to work." "Oh, yes, of course. You're the breadwinner. You carry everything on your fragile shoulders. And I'm just an invalid roommate you can ignore."
Jack started his familiar refrain again. Realizing that arguing with her husband would only waste time and energy, Megan hastily cooked him an omelette. The man, picking at it, muttered, "Something else next time. Maybe a spicy soup." Megan ignored him this time. She wasn't about to offer a multi-course breakfast like a hotel. After dressing hastily and hearing her husband accuse her of wearing makeup to attract other men, Megan fled the apartment. Only after driving a couple of blocks did she realize she'd forgotten the most important thing: a box with desserts left in the refrigerator. Stopped at a traffic light, Megan blurted out, "My head's not working at all from lack of sleep. Or maybe it's not just that." The woman jabbed at the steering wheel in frustration. Soon other drivers started honking behind her, hinting that the light wouldn't get greener and it was time to go. Sighing, Megan turned around and drove back. But in the apartment, Megan heard the familiar sounds of gunfire and swearing. Nothing criminal, of course. Her husband was just fighting someone online again. Megan slipped into the kitchen past his room, the door to which was open. She didn't want to be seen by him. The woman took the box of desserts and hurried back. However, she stopped like a stump. Megan noticed 2 desserts were missing. Her heart leapt to her throat, her cheeks flushing. She was about to burst into her husband's room and demand an explanation when she heard his smug voice, interrupted by unpleasant chewing.
"Frankie, shall we repeat the party this weekend? Just call Sarah. Next time, I'll definitely put her to bed. Have you seen what a babe she is?"
Megan froze and listened. Through the gap between the door and wall, she could see the back of her husband, sitting at the computer wearing large headphones. Unaware of Megan's return, he was chatting with his best friend, vividly discussing their weekend fun while devouring the cakes Megan had made earlier. Megan couldn't hear Frankie's responses, but her husband's words rang out clearly, stinging her cheeks and sobering her up.
"I haven't slept with Megan since the accident, all under the guise of being an invalid, though we started abstaining earlier after her operation. Something was removed from her female parts, and she's always busy, spinning around, doing things, her eyes flashing. No, everything suits me fine."
Unable to contain her emotions, Megan entered the room. But Jack didn't even flinch. He continued bragging, smiling and clicking his computer mouse.
"The cast came off a month ago. I arranged with a doctor I know to make a second one. I put it on when my wife's around. Megan hasn't noticed a thing."
He laughed and bent to scratch his leg, which, surprise, surprise, had no cast.
"Why should I be ashamed? My life's become like in royal family. I don't want to return to the old routine. I'm satisfied with everything. And if we can still party on weekends, it's not just life, it's paradise. And also—"
Megan stopped listening to whatever else Jack planned to tell his friend. She swung the box of dessert leftovers at her husband's head. The projectile hit its mark, making the man twitch and squeal like a piglet. He yanked off his headphones, spinning sharply in his computer chair. Jack's face drained of colour, his expression terrified. Megan, red as a poppy, clenched her fists and shook with anger. Hot tears choked her.
"How could you? You brute!" she shouted. "Megan, listen, it's not what you think,"
Jack protested. "What is it then?" Megan gasped with indignation. "Go on. I'm ready to hear your miraculous story. Maybe Jesus came to you and touched your foot, saying, 'Rise and walk.' How else can you explain being without a cast? And Sarah, you're a real ladies' man."
"Megan, calm down,"
the man suddenly interrupted, springing to his feet.
"Think about it. What can I do? You're not sleeping with me. Besides, how am I supposed to feel like a man around you if you've been bathing me for 2 months?"
"Exactly," the wife shouted back. "You've got it made, Jack. I'm running around here like a servant for a perfectly healthy man, and you're having fun, and you've even made me the guilty one. I didn't go to bed with you because I wasn't sleeping at all, working hard to pay the mortgage."
"Megan, let's calm down,"
Jack babbled, taking a step toward her. The woman recoiled as if from fire. "To hell with you. I don't want to see you again." With that, Megan stormed out of the apartment. Jack didn't chase after her. In her car, Megan, sobbing, called the customer to admit the desserts wouldn't be ready. Hello, I've let you down terribly," she choked out. "I can make you a free cake and refund your money, of course." Hearing her distress, the man grew concerned. "Do you need help?" he asked. "Only if you're a lawyer," Megan sobbed. Silence hung on the line before the customer spoke. "Actually, I am a lawyer." An hour later, Megan sat in Hector Molina's office, now as the client. Hector turned out to be a consummate professional. Soon, Megan and Jack divorced, with Megan keeping the apartment she'd been paying the mortgage on. Fortunately, the mortgage was in her mother's name, as her mother-in-law had refused to take responsibility, a decision she later regretted. Jack moved back in with his mother, and as Daphne imagined, they lived in harmony while gossiping about Megan. However, Megan couldn't care less about their fate. Leaving the courtroom, she took her first, deep, unencumbered breath in recent memory. Megan began living on her own terms, baking cakes and cupcakes, sleeping soundly at night, and working on decor without interruptions. She started going out with her friend, allowing herself to laugh loudly and genuinely. Frequenting cafes and bars, she began dressing up again and soon blossomed. Later, Megan baked an enormous cake and many truffles. She brought this bounty to Hector's law office. "I'd like to thank you, to return you my debt," she said, blushing. "Thank you for being so understanding back then." The lawyer's colleagues welcomed the pastry chef enthusiastically. Work ground to a halt as the office filled with the aroma of coffee and tea. After tasting the dessert, Hector looked at Megan and said, "I'm a straightforward person, so I'll tell you directly. I like you. I didn't say anything earlier because you are my client, and that would have been highly unprofessional. But you can't fight your heart. Tell me, is it too soon to ask you out? It's only been a short while since your divorce." Megan blushed and nodded at the cake. "Did the dessert make such an impression on you?" she asked coyly. "Well, they say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach," Hector replied with a smile. Megan laughed and accepted the invitation. One date led to a second, then a third. Soon, Hector invited Megan to move in, and eventually they married. When Megan caught the flu, Hector doted on her. He always treated her like a delicate flower and never belittled her hard work. On the contrary, he was proud of her. A year later, they welcomed their son, and their happiness was complete. The bright morning sun shone through the old blinds, illuminating the small room. The sleepy woman lying on the bed squeezed her already closed eyes shut tightly. Today was a day off, and there was no need to get up too early. Andrea, open up!" Suddenly came a familiar male voice from behind the front door. The walls in the old 3-story house were so thin that even quiet conversations of neighbours could be heard. "What do you want?" the woman called back, then stood up, threw on a robe and walked to the door. "Do you know what time it is? It's a day off. I want to sleep in." "Open up, Andrea. Don't make me get the keys." The man's voice sounded threatening. "Sydney, what do you want?" The woman took a deep breath and opened the lock. She didn't want to provoke the apartment owner into a scandal. "I want you to let me in. I have the right to come in and see how my tenants live." The thin and tall man didn't ask for permission. He sharply opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The sleepy woman did not obstruct him in any way. She knew that Sydney would do as he saw fit anyway. "You come here every day already," Andrea said unhappily. The owner of the apartment indeed often visited them, and Andrea knew exactly why he did it. About a year ago, Sydney had been released from prison, where he had served 5 years for robbery and death threats. By the time he was released, his mother had already died, leaving her son 2 small apartments in a dilapidated house. To have some income, the man decided to find tenants. He rented one apartment to Andrea and her young daughter, and he settled in another apartment in a neighbouring entrance. The attractive woman immediately caught the former prisoner's eye. He hoped that Andrea's heart would sooner or later melt, and she would definitely pay attention to him. However, the woman did not like Sydney at all. The arrogant man with tattoos and yellow teeth from cigarettes, had no chance to attract the blonde, slender woman. Andrea was generally afraid of such characters. She had already had a sad relationship with her daughter's father. She didn't want to tie her life to dubious men any more. "How are you doing? Is everything working? Water, lights, heat?" The landlord paced around the apartment, pretending to be concerned about comfort. "Yes, everything's fine. We have no complaints," Andrea replied briefly, and adjusted the robe she had hastily thrown on. She was getting uncomfortable with the man's furtive scrutiny of her. "You still haven't thought about going out for a cup of coffee with me?" A couple of days ago, he had already made this proposal to Andrea. However, the woman had tactfully refused him. "Sydney, I'm not in the mood for a date right now. You know I'm looking for a job. If I don't find one, I won't have money for rent. So it's in your best interest not to distract me from my search," the woman said as diplomatically as she could. She was afraid to refuse an ex-con too harshly. "Andrea, what a short-sighted woman you are. If you'd agree to go out with me, you wouldn't have to pay." Sydney shrugged, then approached the woman and slid a lustful glance at her slender figure. Andrea moved away from the pressing admirer and tried to get him out of the door as quickly as possible. "Look, I'm only recently divorced, and you're already offering me a relationship. Let me recover. My ex drained me completely, so I don't even think about men anymore." "Well, I'm not him," Sydney smiled. "I would never hurt a woman like you." "I believe you, but still." Andrea went to the door and took the handle defiantly. She wanted to let the man know that their conversation had come to an end. "Okay, I understand," the man muttered unhappily and obediently left the apartment. But before Andrea closed the door behind him, he turned around and added, "Anyway, you think about the date." "I will." After the ex-convict left, the woman exhaled with relief. It was getting harder and harder to get Sydney out each time. Andrea decided that as soon as she got a new job, she would definitely move out of this terrible place. A former colleague told her about a new job opportunity. The friend had gotten a job in a large firm. The company needed cleaning staff, and the salary offered was not bad. Such an offer seemed quite tempting to Andrea. She used to sell at the market. Every time there was a theft in the store, the bosses didn't want to suffer losses. To compensate for shortages, the owner constantly deducted an impressive amount of money from the employees' salaries. At first, Andrea acquiesced to such exploitative working conditions, but the longer it went on, the more money was deducted from her monthly payments. Eventually, the woman grew tired of this policy. She didn't want to work for free anymore. Andrea needed to pay rent and feed and clothe her 9-year-old child. After the divorce, her daughter's father didn't pay the former family a penny. Andrea even filed an application with the court to establish alimony, but very soon the woman received a letter of refusal. The court notice stated that according to the results of a DNA test, the girl had no family ties with Andrea's ex-husband. After reading this document, the woman was hysterical. Her daughter was not just her father's daughter, she was his real copy. However, Andrea decided not to argue with her husband. She realized how her former spouse had pulled off this tricky scheme. He had relatives who worked in a private lab. He could easily convince them to fake all the necessary results and then claim he wouldn't pay alimony for someone else's child. So Andrea decided not to prove anything to the court. She did not want to spend either time or money on it. Taking advantage of the test results, the woman crossed out her husband's name from all of Kim's documents. Left alone with a young daughter, Andrea worked hard. After voluntarily leaving her job at the store, she decided she would no longer work in retail. The bosses always punished ordinary employees for stolen goods. Now she carefully avoided jobs that required material responsibility. One day, Andrea accidentally met a former colleague who had recently started working as a barmaid at a large firm. The acquaintance took pity on the lonely, unemployed woman and shared information about a vacancy in the same organization. Her friend explained that the company urgently needed a cleaner. "Oh, you'd be a great help. I haven't been able to find anything suitable for a month now," Andrea complained. "All I keep finding are sales positions." "Yes, I had a hard time finding a suitable job too, but now I'm happy. The company is large and doesn't skimp on decent salaries. Vacation, sick leave, everything is provided." The barmaid gave Andrea the address and phone number of her organization, and the woman said a goodbye. For the first time in a while, Andrea felt hopeful. Now all she had to do was go to the personnel department for a short interview. "Hi, may I come in?" the excited woman asked, opening the door ajar and peeking inside. About 10 employees were in the office, each so busy that they paid no attention to the visitor. Andrea approached one of the women sitting at a computer. Finally, the employee looked up and noticed her. "May I help you?" she asked kindly. "Yes, I'm here for an interview. I was told to come to room 211. "What position are you applying for?" "I heard you were looking for office cleaners." "Okay, just a moment," the woman said. She left her desk, walked to the back of the room, and quietly spoke to another woman. After they exchanged a few words, the clerk looked in Andrea's direction and waved her over. Andrea followed the same path and approached the woman's desk. Next to her computer was a sign that read, "Head of Personnel Department." "Good afternoon. Are you Andrea Presnell?" the woman asked, glancing at the applicant's profile. "Yes, I called yesterday about the job," Andrea replied, timidly perching on the edge of her chair. "I see," the woman replied indifferently. "You used to work in retail? Why did you leave? Usually people who can't find work elsewhere come to us as janitors, but in your case it's the opposite." "Well, in retail you have to be responsible for the safety of goods, so I'd rather not go back to that field." "I understand," the woman said thoughtfully, then continued. "But do you think cleaning work doesn't come with responsibilities? We have a lot of expensive equipment here. There was even a case when our employee was cleaning a window, accidentally knocked over a bucket of water, and ruined a new printer. We didn't dock his pay, of course, but it's unpleasant when someone from our team acts carelessly." No, I'm a very responsible person," Andrea said, regretting that she'd revealed the true reason for leaving her store job. She worried the HR manager might have gotten the wrong impression. "I'm conscientious about every task I undertake." "All right," the woman said without much interest. "We'll call you later when we've decided." "Later?" Andrea was surprised. She suddenly realized that this standard response meant she wasn't suitable for the position. Feeling hurt, Andrea even wanted to cry. She had been so hopeful about this job that she'd already planned steps to move out of her troubled home. "Yes? You don't think you're the only candidate, do you? So, I'll be in touch." The woman turned her attention back to her computer, ending the conversation. Lowering her gaze, Andrea slowly stood and headed for the exit. Her eyes began to fill with tears, but before she could cry, she was called back by a man in a suit who had been sitting at a neighbouring table, observing the exchange. "Mrs. Presnell, come back, please." A tall, imposing man with a loud voice stood up and approached the head of the personnel department. "Well,
Bridget, what are you thinking? What other candidates do we have? While you review all of them, we'll be covered in dust. Hire Mrs. Presnell. Have her start work tomorrow. Are you sure, Mr. Lyle? The woman's tone changed noticeably. She doesn't even have any experience. Bridget, the man looked reproachfully at the employee. You're not hiring her to be a lawyer. What experience? In what? Mopping floors? Are you serious? The man glared at his employee. He clearly disliked how uncooperative she was being with the candidate. All right, as you say, Bridget relented under the director's pressure. After all, he was her boss, and she didn't want to challenge his decision. After the conversation, the man hurriedly left. As he passed by, Andrea smiled slightly at her saviour. In response, Mr. Lyle nodded approvingly. Bridget, with undisguised discontent, accepted the necessary documents from the applicant and drew up the employment contract. From the next day, Andrea could finally start work and become a full-fledged employee of a large law firm. She cleaned the floors in the offices and corridor, dusted, and ensured that the hygiene products in the restrooms were replenished. Andrea's work was physically demanding, but she was satisfied. She received her paycheck on time. No one withheld any shortages from her. Very soon, she moved out of her old apartment into a more comfortable one nearby. Her daughter Kim was also happy about the change. Along with the move, Andrea changed Kim's school. Now the girl studied in a bright, spacious institution. Sometimes in the afternoon, Kim came to her mother's workplace, not wanting to be alone at home after school. At first, Andrea worried that her bosses would object to the child's presence, but the employees understood her situation. Bridget, too, had no objections to the girl being near her mother. After the conversation with the director during the interview, she generally preferred not to criticize the new employee. The lady feared incurring Mr. Lyle's wrath. Her salary was high, and she didn't want to lose her comfortable position because of a cleaner. "Mum, I've wiped off all of the dust. What else can I do for you?" the girl asked, running up to her mother, who was mopping the hallway floors. "Oh, thank you, Kim. What would I do without you? You've grown into such a helper," Andrea said with a smile, gently embracing her daughter. "That's right, she is your helper," came a man's approaching voice. It was Mr. Lyle, who had overheard the cleaning lady's words as he left his office. "Thank you," Andrea smiled timidly. "How are you doing here? Getting along? Everything okay?" the director inquired. It was the first time he had spoken to Andrea since the incident in the HR office. "Yes, everything's good. I like it. The working conditions and salary are satisfactory, and my daughter can be close to me. I don't have anyone to leave her with after school." "It's good that you're happy with everything." The director smiled, then turned to Kim. "Just don't work too hard here, or they'll say we're exploiting child labour." Andrea laughed. "What exploitation? She's just playing around, waving a rag and pretending she's cleaning the whole office." They all laughed and then went about their business. Andrea genuinely liked the director of the law firm. Although he owned a company, there was something kind and human about him that many other wealthy people lacked. Andrea knew that Mr. Lyle was married to an unpleasant woman named Debbie, the daughter of a big shot in the city. The law firm's employees disliked it when the director's wife visited the office. Such visits were infrequent, but always left a bad impression. Debbie always behaved arrogantly towards employees, as if she owned the organization. Despite lacking legal education or understanding of the company's operations, she didn't hesitate to lecture the employees. Andrea had seen the director's wife only once. She noticed that the tall, slender Debbie was obsessed with her appearance. Employees
rumoured that the boss's wife earned money by selling courses on the internet. Andrea had never been interested in internet content, so she didn't understand what kind of work it was. But soon the cleaner not only became acquainted with Debbie's activities, but also became an unwilling participant in them. One day, when Kim, as usual, came to her mother's workplace after school, Andrea casually complained about feeling unwell. Her muscles ached, either from physical labour or an impending illness. "Mum, let me mop the floors for you. I'm old enough to do it myself, and you can rest," Kim pleaded, pained to see her mother suffering. "Don't worry, Kim. I can manage on my own. As Mr. Lyle said, we can't exploit child labour." "OK, what about dividing the work? I'll mop the floors and you dust the windowsills. At least you won't be hunched over with your bad back," the wise girl insisted. "If you collapse now, it'll be much worse." "All right," Andrea conceded, lacking the energy to argue further. "Let's split it." They did as Kim suggested. The girl diligently cleaned the floors in the half-empty office, while her mother dusted the equipment, tables and windowsills. Suddenly the director's wife entered. At the sight of a schoolgirl with a mop, she was dumbfounded. "What's this? Who are you? And what are you doing here?" Debbie demanded, approaching Kim. "Washing the floors," Kim replied fearfully. "Ah, you're washing the floors," the woman smirked, then turned to Andrea. "Is this your daughter?" "Yes." "How fragile people nowadays." Debbie laughed loudly. "Our cleaners can't manage on their own, so they're bringing in children and grandchildren." "It's just that my mum wasn't feeling well, and I wanted to help her," Kim tried to explain. "Uh-huh. Then help more thoroughly," Debbie said, then defiantly kicked over the bucket of water. Dirty water instantly spilled across the office floor. Kim cried with resentment, but quickly grabbed a rag and began mopping up the spill. "Oh, yes, Cinderella grabbed the rag," Debbie exclaimed. Kim and Andrea watched in disbelief as the boss's wife pulled out her smartphone and started filming the scene. Lisa was seething with rage. She felt so bad for her daughter that she wanted to grab the spoiled brat by the hair and drag her face into the muddy puddle. But Andrea held back. She was the director's wife, and Andrea didn't want to lose her job over her emotions. Instead of interfering with the unpleasant filming, Andrea took a rag and began to help Jana collect water from the floor. This gesture only amused the heartless woman more. She laughed loudly, filming and actively commenting on everything that was happening. During the recording, Debbie made derogatory remarks about the cleaning lady, using the word slave several times. This wasn't just for the video, it was Debbie's way of thinking. Growing up in a wealthy family, she always saw service staff as the lowest stratum. She never considered ordinary labourers as people, always trying to insult or cruelly offend them when possible. Debbie's terrible behaviour often went unpunished. Many were afraid to object to the daughter of a wealthy businessman. But sometimes people dared to cross her, which she took extremely personally. Vindictive Debbie always avenged the perceived offender. Because of her, waiters, maids, and other working-class people had been fired multiple times. This nasty character of Debbie's always caused disputes with her husband. Mr. Lyle didn't divide people into castes. For him, any profession was honourable. He couldn't understand his wife's attitude towards workers, especially since without them, she wouldn't even be able to brew herself a cup of coffee. In the midst of events, the director suddenly appeared in the office. "Debbie, stop filming now! What are you doing here?" the man said in indignation, so loudly that everyone flinched. "Are you out of your mind? How are you behaving? You know, it's you who need to be taught a lesson.
Grab a rag and clean up this filth."
No one expected such a harsh reaction from the director. Even Debbie stood dumbfounded.
"What do you think you're doing, Jake? How dare you talk to me like that? I'm going to call my dad, and you'll be on the street in no time."
The insulted woman's eyes burned with hatred.
"Call whoever you want. This is my company, not your father's."
The couple argued and shouted at each other for a few more minutes. Andrea became so uncomfortable with the whole situation that she decided to try and diffuse the conflict. She approached Debbie and said modestly, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have trusted my daughter to wash the floors. She left the bucket right in the middle of the aisle, and you must have accidentally knocked it over. We'll clean it up right away. You don't have to fight about it."
"Of course you will. What else are you here for?"
Debbie replied arrogantly and looked defiantly into her husband's eyes. The director only shook his head and then silently left. Closed in his office, Mr. Lyle couldn't compose himself for a long time. He was shaking with anger. He realized that he had arranged a family scandal in front of his subordinates in vain, but his wife's defiant behavior had so infuriated him that he simply couldn't restrain himself. After the incident, Andrea and Kim finished cleaning and then left for home, upset. As for Debbie, she harbored a grudge against her spouse. She wanted her husband to admit he was wrong and apologize for embarrassing her in front of ordinary workers. But Jake felt no guilt, so Debbie decided she would definitely take revenge on her husband. She called her influential father and arranged a meeting in a restaurant. The spoiled woman spent hours persuading her wealthy father to make Jake lose his successful law firm. She accused her spouse of infidelity and aggressive behavior, lying desperately and even squeezing out a tear, carefully blotting her thickly painted eyes. From the emotional story of his favourite daughter, the influential father became furious.
"Why did you keep silent before? I would have put Jake in his place long ago. No one dares to offend my dear daughter."
"I thought everything would work out and our relationship would improve, but I was wrong. Things got worse." The woman lied brazenly. She wanted to use her father's blind love to take revenge on her spouse. The breakup had been brewing for a long time. They were too different, the passion long gone, and there was nothing else between them. Without thinking long, the millionaire called his son-in-law and gave him a real beating.
"How dare you treat my daughter like that? Do you think I can't take everything away from you? Half your clients are good friends of mine. All I have to do is snap my fingers, and they won't use your services any more. In that case, your firm will go under."
"Mr. Wise, I didn't do anything wrong to Debbie. We had a fight because of her behavior in my office." The man knew how his father-in-law felt about his daughter, so he didn't understand how to resolve this conflict peacefully.
"Ask her for forgiveness and pray that she forgives you. Then I'll think twice about keeping your company."
"Why should I apologize? It's not my fault." Jake understood that if his wife held a grudge against him, no apology would help. It remained only to try to convince his father-in-law not to interfere with the work of his firm. But this was also a dubious idea, since Mr. Wise listened to no one but his daughter. While the squabbles between father-in-law and son-in-law were gaining momentum, a satisfied Debbie pushed the video on the internet, which depicted Andrea with her daughter. For some unknown reason, the woman thought that the video was very funny and amusing. The video attracted significant interest, quickly amassing hundreds of thousands of views. Despite widespread condemnation of its creator, Debbie was pleased with its popularity. The scandalous content brought in many views, consequently, new advertisers. Andrea, unaware of her sudden fame, became an overnight sensation. Many viewers sympathized with her plight, commenting that no one deserves such rude treatment. Conversely, Debbie was labeled a stupid rich girl, willing to bully ordinary employees for dubious publicity. Andrea, not being on social media, only learned of her popularity on Monday morning when a friend showed her the clip and the supportive comments. Initially furious that the director's wife had posted the video online, Andrea's anger turned to satisfaction after reading the comments. At the same time, about Debbie, people absolutely did not restrain themselves in statements. Enthused by this support, Andrea even created her own social media account, quickly gaining many subscribers who sent messages of encouragement. While the internet buzzed with heated debates about the viral video, real-world events were unfolding too. Mr. Wise, unhappy with his son-in-law's treatment of his beloved daughter, decided to confront him personally. "Well, have you decided how we'll handle this situation?" the man asked with unconcealed arrogance. "What do you mean?" Jake replied, perplexed. "Debbie's been living at my house for a week now. She says she's not going back to you. She wants a divorce." "I know. We've discussed it. The lawyers have already started the process. We'll divide the assets and go our separate ways." "No, that won't do. The firm must be fully owned by my daughter. It'll be compensation for how you've treated her." "What?" Jake exclaimed in surprise. "Debbie has nothing to do with the company. I founded it and made it successful. If your daughter wants compensation, I suggest leaving her the house and other real estate, but she won't have the firm." "It'll be as I say," Mr. Wise replied angrily. "Think about it. If you don't agree, I'll bankrupt the company in days. How many people will lose their jobs because of your pride? It's better to give up the company voluntarily. Let it continue without you, rather than disappear entirely." These words from the old millionaire shocked Jake, but he knew all too well that Mr. Wise had the means to carry out his threat. Not wanting to jeopardize his employees' livelihoods or deprive clients of quality legal services, Jake reluctantly decided to transfer management to his wife. Left without his beloved job, Jake fell into despair. He had come a long way to achieve success, and he had done it without help. But how wrong he was to marry Debbie, a woman of stunning beauty but vindictive nature. Now she was the director of his company, and Jake tried to drown his sorrow in alcohol. Meanwhile, Debbie, upon assuming her new role, immediately terminated Andrea's employment. However, when the cleaner learned about the change in ownership, she had already decided to leave the company. Andrea had money for the first time. She saved a small amount while she was working, but now the woman was forced to look for a new vacancy. One day, as she browsed job listings online, she received an unexpected message. It was from an elderly woman who had stumbled upon the viral video featuring Andrea. The stranger claimed that Andrea bore a striking resemblance to her daughter, who had passed away 6 months ago. To support her claim, the woman sent several photos of her deceased daughter. Andrea was shocked when she saw the pictures. The resemblance to this stranger was uncanny. Intrigued, Andrea decided to meet the woman. "Hello," Andrea said as she approached a table in the cafe where an elderly man and woman sat. Lisa recognized the woman as the stranger who had messaged her. The couple greeted her, looking at each other in amazement. "You're the spitting image of our daughter. We can't believe it. How can two unrelated people look so identical?" "I agree. It's astonishing," Andrea replied as she sat down. "Those pictures you sent me left me speechless too." "May I ask where and when you were born? Who are your parents?" asked the man. "Actually, I'm from an orphanage," Andrea began, recounting her difficult past to the elderly couple. "My parents abandoned me at birth. At least, that's what my file says. I lived in the orphanage until I was 6, then a single woman adopted me. She passed away shortly after I became an adult." Upon hearing Andrea's story, the couple sat in stunned silence. Tears welled up in their eyes, and the man shook his head, as if in denial. Andrea watched their emotional reaction with growing bewilderment. "What's wrong?" she asked, concerned. "Why are you reacting this way?"
"Oh dear," the man sighed. "We have our own sad story. Many years ago, at the height of our careers, my wife and I learned we were going to be parents. Midway through the pregnancy, the doctor told us we were having twins. Joy overwhelmed us as we prepared for the birth of 2 daughters, but when the labour came, everything went awry. The midwife entered the room with only 1 girl, saying the second baby hadn't survived. We wanted to say goodbye to our lost daughter, but the doctor convinced us it was better not to. He claimed that in his experience, it's too difficult for parents to overcome the loss afterward. We never got to hold our little girl. She was buried by the medical staff."
"I'm so sorry for your loss. For parents, there's nothing worse than losing a child," Andrea said sadly, but she still didn't understand how this story related to her.
"Andrea, after seeing you in the video, my wife and I began to doubt that our Brooks twin had died at birth. Back then, it wasn't uncommon for people to kidnap babies and sell them to childless parents. We now suspect we might have been the victims of such a criminal group."
"You think I'm the twin girl?" the woman gasped.
"We don't rule out that possibility. Your age matches our deceased daughter's exactly. You even share the same birth month."
"But if I was kidnapped to be sold, how did I end up in an orphanage?"
"We're not sure. Perhaps something went wrong for the kidnappers. If they'd returned you, they'd have faced jail time. So they might have abandoned you at the orphanage and fabricated your file."
"But how can you verify this? What if you're mistaken, and I'm not your daughter?"
"We've considered that too. To be certain, we'd need to do a DNA test. If you're willing, of course."
Andrea was stunned by this revelation. She agreed to provide a DNA sample, and the DNA test results shocked everyone involved. The analysis confirmed that Andrea was indeed the daughter of the couple. The parents embraced the woman as if she had risen from the dead. As for Andrea, at first she couldn't believe what was happening, but gradually she began to adjust to the idea that she was no longer an orphan. Andrea and her daughter moved into her parents' spacious house. The couple turned out to be wealthy people, and it was obvious that their newly found daughter wouldn't need anything. Andrea no longer worried about where she'd live when her meagre savings ran out. A couple of months later, Andrea bumped into an old acquaintance. The barmaid, who had once helped her get a job at a law firm, told her about significant changes at the office. After the director's departure, the organization's business had rapidly deteriorated. Uneducated and inexperienced in management, Debbie had essentially ruined the company. Her father was extremely displeased with his daughter. Soon he learned that she had misled him. It turned out that Jake had never mistreated his wife. The situation was quite the opposite. "And what about the former director? Do you know where he is now? What he's doing?" Andrea inquired about the man who had repeatedly stood up for her when she was a cleaning lady. "Oh, they say he's become an alcoholic. After losing his company, he became disillusioned with life." "That's terrible," Andrea said sadly. "But do you know where I can find him?" "I do. He has a house in the neighbourhood near Aspen Lake. It's the most beautiful one there." Without hesitation, Andrea went to see the man. She wanted to help her former boss overcome his addiction, feeling guilty about what had happened. "Hello, Mr. Lyle." Andrea smiled when a familiar man opened the door.
"Ah, Andrea, what brings you here?" replied the unshaven Jake, surprised.
"I came to talk to you." the man invited his former cleaner into his house. Over tea, Andrea shared her amazing story about her parents. Then she made an interesting proposal. "My father owns a construction business. He needs a skilled and experienced lawyer. As soon as I heard about it, I thought of you. Perhaps you'd consider the offer? You're a brilliant and ambitious man. Don't ruin your life over a lost firm. Everything in this life is replaceable." The woman's words impressed Jake and also made him feel awkward. He realized that indeed he was a mature, strong man, and he shouldn't drink, but try to rebuild everything. Jake accepted Andrea's father's proposal and began working as a lawyer in the construction firm. Often crossing paths with Andrea at his employer's house, Jake realized he had developed feelings for this modest, soulful woman. Soon, he and Andrea began a romantic relationship. Andrea's parents were delighted that their daughter had found someone special. They liked Jake very much, seeing him as a decent and intelligent man. After a couple of months, Andrea moved with her daughter to Jake's house. Following his divorce, the mansion had remained in his ownership. Jake proposed to Andrea, and they began planning their wedding. One day the doorbell of the huge mansion rang. Jake opened the door and was stunned to see his former wife standing there. Debbie said hello and walked into the living room uninvited. "How are you doing, honey?" she asked, eyeing her ex-husband playfully. "I'm fine, though I'm certainly not your honey anymore," the man replied calmly. He had long ago moved past the situation with the firm and felt no negativity towards Debbie. "I'm doing fine too. I was wondering if we could try again. After all, we have a lot in common," Debbie said, though she didn't really believe it. She had driven the law firm to bankruptcy, fallen out with her millionaire father, and her online activities no longer brought her income. As a result, Debbie was at a loss and hoped her ex-spouse might want to reconnect. "I'm sorry, Debbie, but you've come to the wrong place." "And why is that?" As soon as she asked, Andrea appeared behind Jake in casual clothes. "What are you doing here?" Debbie exclaimed. "First of all, hello," Andrea replied calmly. "And secondly, what are you doing in our house?" "Your house?" Debbie shrieked. "This is my house. Cleaning ladies have no place here." "Listen, Debbie," Jake intervened, trying to stop his ex-wife's rudeness. "We're divorced. You got my firm, which you ruined, and I kept this house. It's not yours anymore." "You mean you're living here now with that poor cleaner?" Debbie sneered. "I mean that I'm truly happy now. I finally have a woman I love who doesn't judge people by their social status." Jake couldn't help but retort. Debbie tried to object, but Jake didn't let her. He simply escorted her out and told her not to bother them again. Andrea was grateful that her fiancé had stood up for her once more. Since she first met Jake, he had always treated her with kindness and respect. Soon after, the couple married. Jake adopted Kim, giving her his last name. Andrea now understood what true love and a good partnership meant. Jake became a wonderful father to Kim, and Andrea often thought with a smile, "How unpredictable are the paths that lead to happiness. Mine came through a spilled bucket." The Venus Perfection Plastic Surgery Centre in the capital was such a fashionable clinic that getting an appointment, even just for a consultation, was considered incredible luck. Young promising surgeon Dr. Scott Clem found himself working there, not by his own means. He was taken care of by his big fan. Or rather, not even by the young lady herself, but through the connections and contacts of her generous boyfriend. To be honest, without jokes or puns, Dr. Clem's hands were, without exaggeration, golden. After a couple of months of internships at the Plastic Surgery Centre, many instantly rejuvenated women were added to the army of beauties that the others were immediately covered with a crust of envy. Yet Scott longed for normal work as a surgeon. He missed it. He even dreamed about it at night. The operating room bathed in bright lights, a collection of shining metal instruments, a patient on the table whose life he, Scott, would save. He didn't want to sculpt new bodies and faces, but to give people a chance to live on. The fees for plastic surgeons were undoubtedly substantial, but his professional happiness didn't lie in these sweet cakes. Neither the fashionable apartment nor the expensive car shining with lacquered sides and boasting all the features of its legendary brand made him happy. He recalled the day when, after a car accident, a wealthy person's lover came to his desk with a mangled, cut-up face, which he lovingly pieced back together. Later, in the residence room, he joked with his colleagues, "Why are you laughing like horses? I've adjusted all the life-supporting functions of the body, and then I saw a goddess. It would have been a sin to disfigure such a face with a standard approach. The anesthesia was still working perfectly. I couldn't pass up the opportunity. I chiselled her face millimetre by millimetre." He was saving a life and received unexpected gratitude. He was offered a chance to change his place of work, with a salary so large that anyone would get dizzy from the bright prospects. Dr. Clem was also weak when it came to rewarding honest labour. He liked to dress stylishly, take his hearty girlfriends to nightclubs, pamper them with gifts, and enjoy weekend trips to out-of-town spa complexes. All these pleasures required significant financial investments, so he didn't resist, chose this manna from heaven, and then regretted it, though he never admitted it aloud. The appearance of a handsome and intelligent surgeon in the private clinic immediately caused female excitement among the staff. But Scott Clem didn't engage in workplace relationships on principle. As he himself argued to his male colleagues, "I never confuse the sinful with the righteous. It's apples and oranges." He joked and laughed, and the nurses lost all hope. Only Nina disagreed with him in her heart and fervently persuaded the other nurses. He just hasn't met his one true love yet, the one who will follow him to the ends of the earth, who will be by his side, as they say, in sorrow and in joy. With glowing cheeks, she rushed to study the schedule, to see who would assist the surgeon maestro in the operating room this time. She would break out in red spots if she saw her name in the appropriate column. She was a fairly skillful, experienced nurse, but too naive when it came to men. Her appearance was ordinary. Tons of makeup weren't her thing. She didn't even know how to apply it properly. Once, for a corporate party, she wore makeup that made her look like a scarecrow. The head nurse silently grabbed her by the arm, dragged her to the bathroom, and washed her face, so that Nina wouldn't embarrass herself in front of people with her clownish colouring. It wasn't difficult to realise that Nina was in love with Dr. Clem, but her female colleagues didn't tease her about it. The girl supported her whole family. She had an elderly mother and 2 younger brothers who hadn't yet finished school. In the field of complex terms, Nina was like a fish in water. Words like brachioplasty, abdominoplasty, or blepharoplasty would immediately cause holy horror in the average person. For her it was like a multiply table. She knew what she was talking about. And also, with her eyes closed, as if she could see, she immediately found elevators, retractors, forceps, equipment for osteotomy, nasal dilators, and all other local medical treasures on the special table in the operating room. She shouldn't have known about this ability, but on a bet with the other nurses, they had arranged a competition to see who would be the fastest to orient themselves if the standard order was jokingly disrupted. Nina was the first. As Dr. Clem put it, like a dashing horse ahead of the whole planet. And then He went and kissed her on the forehead as a reward. The girl almost went crazy. She was afraid to wash her face for 3 days. So now, she found herself next to the object of her adoration during the next surgical intervention. She couldn't imagine greater happiness. Everything would have been fine in the friendly team of the Plastic Surgery Centre, but is there any decent institution without its own homegrown grey cardinal? This honourable role of the apex of other people's fates, the instigator of all under-the-carpet games, was taken on by the director of the medical institution. From the very beginning, Jack Garrett didn't like the newcomer, even though Dr. Clem turned out to be a talented surgeon. He was keeping a warm place for his wife's younger brother. While he was gaining surgical strength in another hospital, working on ordinary citizens to hone his skills, so to speak, the director of the clinic was preparing the place here to serve rich clients. Mr. Garrett himself was never a surgeon, a psychotherapist by speciality. He could, if necessary, diffuse any conflict or disagreement with clients. He was both hard and soft when necessary. When needed, steel notes would appear in his voice. When the situation required it, he could be creepy and cunning, like a forest predator. Dr. Clem never tried to gauge the chief's mood. He operated as naturally as he breathed. There was no shortage of patients eager to go under his knife. Thanks to his efforts, a steady stream of income flowed into the clinic's coffers. The owners of this plastic surgery kingdom treated their specialists well. During operations, Dr. Clem often repeated a phrase like a mantra: "Scalpel cuts, scalpel heals." When Nina heard him mumbling, she immediately asked, "What's that saying?" He replied, "I was fortunate to study under one of the most remarkable surgeons. I even assisted him when he visited the hospital where I used to work. This elderly doctor once told me, people fear the scalpel, thinking it will bring them terrible pain. But firstly, we don't perform surgeries without anesthesia, thank God. Secondly, it's a surgeon's fate to bring relief through acute intervention. Without a scalpel, none of us could do our job. So, the scalpel cuts, but the scalpel also heals. That's an indisputable fact." Nina took this lesson to heart and memorized it. When the clinic received new, expensive imported medical equipment, Nina burst into the residence room with glistening eyes. "Dr. Clem, they've brought such wonderful instruments, the most legendary brands. The bosses spared no expense. There are scalpels, disposable blades, and even the most famous safety blades for this type of surgical equipment. I was dazzled by their splendour. You must see it all." Scott smiled indulgently. He suspected this quick-witted medical professional had feelings for him. Her enthusiasm was both sweet and a little amusing. So he replied good-naturedly to his assistant, "Nina, I will check them out later. And now I have my time to enjoy my coffee in peace. We have a scheduled surgery to remove fat bags. I hope the patient has recovered from her thread lift, so we can perfect her cheeks. She is a pop singer, so let's take her beauty seriously." Dr. Clem patted the nurse on the shoulder, making her blush instantly. "I'd better run. There's not much time left," she exclaimed. This innocent scene didn't escape the director, who had just entered the resident room. Immediately, an insidious plan formed in his mind to expel the hated doctor from the clinic, and with shame. After the operation to remove fat bags from the vocalist, Nina was going home. In her mind, she had had a wonderful day. The new scalpels hadn't been used yet. Dr. Clem had worked with a surgical laser knife. But what did it matter? They had been close to each other for a long time, occasionally brushing against one another during the procedure. Nina cherished this memory. At the entrance to the storeroom, where the new medical equipment was stacked, she encountered the director. Mr. Garrett winked conspiratorially and called out in a velvety, caressing baritone, "Nina, you're just who I needed.
Come to my office in a few minutes. I have a delicate errand for you."
The tired nurse didn't want to stay late at work, but the chief's orders were non-negotiable. A couple of minutes later, she timidly knocked on the chief's office door. He greeted her warmly, praising her professionalism, and offered her some Chinese tea with an unusual flavour. Nina took a few sips of the hot drink and soon felt as if she'd downed 200 grams of vodka in one go. Everything seemed to make sense, but as if through a fog, and she felt inexplicably happy. Mr. Garrett handed her a small piece of paper and smiled encouragingly. "I want to surprise our best surgeon. You realise we're talking about Dr. Clem, right? I think he's fond of you, so he'll surely listen to you. There's a surprise for him in the storeroom on the far shelves. The latest surgical equipment from Switzerland, which you won't find in any other domestic clinic. Write him a note inviting him to meet you in the pantry. Say you want to tell him something innovative for his medical endeavours." 5 minutes later, Mr. Garrett had a note in front of him that read, "Dr. Clem, I'm expecting you in the storeroom in 10 minutes. I have to show you something critical concerning your future work. Signed, Nina." Mr. Garrett practically dragged the girl to the storeroom. Her legs, affected by the sleeping pills, dissolved in the magic tea, could barely support her. She fell asleep on the way. Meanwhile, Dr. Clem was showering in the staff bathroom. He would have gone home already, but the residents' chat for his luxurious new building had warned that the water would be shut off for the next 2 days due to technical reasons. At first, he considered visiting one of his girlfriends for a bath and a delicious meal, but he realised he was so exhausted after 2 scheduled surgeries, rounds, and on-duty patient consultations that he craved only one thing: to be in his own apartment in his soft, comfortable bed. When Mr. Garrett slipped the note into Scott's uniform pocket, he was rinsing his hair. Naturally, he didn't hear retreating footsteps. In the pantry, Nina sat on the floor, sleeping peacefully. The director, who had orchestrated a multifaceted plan, returned to his office. He was eager to see if his late-night scheming would bear fruit. He congratulated himself for keeping a copy of the blind spot diagram when they installed video surveillance in the clinic. His habit of hoarding documents just in case had paid off. He had manoeuvred Nina through these invisible areas, and that oaf Clem would undoubtedly blunder into the most visible spots, right where he'd be caught. For some reason, Mr. Garrett was absolutely certain his plan would work flawlessly. All he had to do was wait a little longer. Dr. Clem, oblivious to the chief's devious plans, felt rejuvenated after a contrast shower. His fatigue vanished completely. He praised himself for enduring the bracing jets of cold water. He even contemplated visiting his girlfriend, considering the 24-hour shift ahead of him. There might not be time for her affection later in the week. As Scott began rolling up his uniform for the clinic's laundry, he felt something rustle in his jacket pocket. Instantly, he was reading the nurse's message, wondering what the girl had concocted. Slipping on his soft slippers, he hurried to the storeroom. Nina was nowhere to be seen. "Is she playing a prank on me?" he thought irritably. "This is hardly the time for such nonsense. It's not even Fool's Day." He navigated the shelves in the semi-darkness, with only small wall-mounted bulbs providing dim illumination. He nearly tripped over Nina, who was sitting on the floor. Startled, he quickly regained his composure. The girl was in a deep sleep, unresponsive to his touch. Scott checked Nina's pulse as a precaution, confirming her heart was beating steadily. He then hoisted his assistant onto his shoulder and carried her out of the warehouse. Without investigating how she'd ended up there, he decided to ask her about it tomorrow. For now, he thought it best to put her in his car and drive her to his house. It was too late to cause a commotion at the clinic. In the car, Nina briefly stirred, mumbling only one word. "Mummy?" She showed no further signs of consciousness, until they reached Dr. Clem's apartment. Scott assumed the nurse was worried about her family, not knowing her whereabouts after work. Despite his aversion to snooping, he searched Nina's pockets, finding her cell phone. Her contact list was short, with her mother's number at the top. Reluctant to alarm an elderly woman late at night, he sent a text. "Mum, I'm on night duty, covering for a co-worker. I'll be home tomorrow." A minute later, the reply came. "Thank goodness, daughter. The boys and I were worried. Hugs." Scott smiled involuntarily, realizing he couldn't remember the last time he'd exchanged such warm messages with his own mother. After divorcing his father long ago, she had remarried, moved to another city. No, Scott didn't feel estranged from his family. She had supported him through medical school, even indulging his small pleasures while he lived in the dormitory. From the start of his medical career, Scott was passionate about surgery. He did everything to secure a position in the coveted department, impressing prominent instructors with his aptitude. By 35, he had honed his skills in a district hospital, often resolving ambiguous cases that initially stumped even senior specialists, literally snatching patients from death's door. Once, he overheard a conversation between two colleagues. An elderly surgeon told his younger assistant, "Don't resent Dr. Clem. I couldn't choose you for this operation, despite your years of service here. The instruments are like extensions of his hands. It's a skill even I can't match. And look, the boy's barely over 30, yet he's handling complex surgeries with ease. I'm not offended that he's outshining other surgeons. Always remember, we're here to save lives, not compete in medical Olympics." Scott was gratified by this assessment from the man he respected and had learned much from. But strangely enough, the halo of deity did not appear over his head after that. Instead, he delved even deeper into his profession, tackling increasingly challenging cases. His mother often lamented that his work obsession would deprive her of grandchildren. Yet, he still had no plans to marry. Scott used to jest, "Mother, give it a rest. Surgery is my wife. She has no rivals in my life." In the bright living room, Nina slept like a princess. Without much thought, Scott retreated to the bedroom and collapsed on the sofa. Exhaustion overwhelmed him instantly. He barely managed to remove his jeans and sweatshirt. The sofa, brought more for show than comfort, now felt like paradise to Dr. Clem. Soon, only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock could be heard in the surgeon's apartment. Neither Dr. Clem nor Nina realized this was to be the last easy day of their lives. The morning at the plastic surgery clinic erupted in chaos. The head nurse, tasked by the director to manage new instruments, discovered utter devastation in the storeroom. Equipment drawers were brutally broken, with remnants of foam, plastic and light chips strewn across the floor. Upon checking the invoice, she realized 30 units of the most expensive inventory were missing. The head of security service was immediately summoned to the boss's office and ordered to retrieve copies of the surveillance camera footage. The footage revealed the clinic's lead surgeon, Dr. Clem, rummaging through shelves in the dimly lit storeroom before hefting something heavy onto his shoulder, though it wasn't clear whether it was a backpack or a large bag. "Don't contact Dr. Clem or investigate this matter," Mr. Garrett commanded. "We can't air our dirty laundry. I'll uncover the circumstances and punish him for this grave offence myself. Everything you've seen must remain confidential." The security chief, who genuinely liked Dr. Clem, dared not disobey. The two men occasionally met at the gym, shared beers after work and chatted about typical male interests. That's why he decided to discreetly message his friend. Minutes later, Dr. Clem, who was due for a 24-hour shift, received a text. "If you didn't do anything unusual at work yesterday, it'd be wise to arrive at the clinic early before your shift starts." The surgeon, roused by his phone's beeping, was initially baffled. Then he remembered bringing Nina home the previous night. Have her relatives complained about her absence? He pondered. What a predicament. Why did she ask to meet in the storeroom, only to fall asleep there? Scott searched for Nina's notes, then recalled crumpling and tossing it in the hallway trash. So now, how could he explain the nurse's presence in his apartment? He needed to wake her urgently. But Nina was deep in uninterrupted slumber, hugging a pillow and smiling serenely. Scott resorted to drastic measures. He lightly dabbed a cotton pad with ammonia and waved it near her nose. She jolted awake, her wide grey eyes fixed on him in shock. Scott didn't need psychiatric training to recognize her dilated pupils as signs of disorientation. Finally, Nina's gaze focused on the man, and she slipped into what's ironically called a stupor. "Dr. Clem, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed. "I live here," the surgeon replied matter-of-factly, "and you graced my humble abode with your presence yesterday." Nina looked around fearfully. "My nurse's uniform is still on. What could have happened between us? I remember nothing after the boss invited me into his office." Mr. Garrett was well versed in pharmaceuticals, one of the latest drugs designed to erase patients' traumatic memories, had evidently wiped out a chunk of her recollection. Yesterday's events up to tonight were clear as day, but then nothing. "Nina, calm down. Let's figure this out together," Scott said gently. "Yesterday, you invited me to meet in the storeroom where we keep our medical instruments. Do you recall why?" "What are you saying, Dr. Clem? I would never dare invite you anywhere. How did I end up in your house? Is this some kind of prank by our colleagues?" "That's what we need to unravel. I found you in the medical warehouse, sound asleep against the shelves. I couldn't wake you, but I couldn't leave you there alone either. I saw no better option than to bring you to my home." Nina stammered. Did you carry me in your arms?" Her cheeks flushed crimson, as was her habit. "Yes, you couldn't walk on your own," Dr. Clem said with a smile. "Now head to the bathroom. You'll find disposable toothbrushes, fresh towels, and a clean terry cloth robe. While I make coffee, you can freshen up. You have half an hour before we leave for work. Oh, and I texted your mother saying you're on after-hours duty." Nina, already en route to the bathroom, turned abruptly. "Thank you, Clem. You're not just a brilliant surgeon and respected colleague. You're humane, generous and kind. I have been assisting for surgeons for years. Many in your field become jaded after daily work with a scalpel, developing a protective layer of indifference to avoid burnout. I don't see that in you yet. For you, every patient is like a cherished child." Meanwhile, Jack Garrett met privately with the owner of the clinic to report the extraordinary situation. The owner of the clinic swallowed the made-up story that the theft was committed by one of the leading surgeons without a second thought. He instructed the director to urgently locate the instruments, return them, and punish the culprit to the full extent of the law. But Mr. Garrett mildly objected. "I wouldn't imprison such a specialist. He saved many lives and made numerous clients happy with their new looks. Let's quietly dismiss him and be done with it. Otherwise, we might face backlash from his admirers." "I wouldn't mince words with him, but you know your field better. First, we need to find out why he'd want to steal all of a sudden. He makes excellent money. He's got everything he needs for his professional life. He's had a strange breakdown. Sort it out." The director escorted the owner to the car and sighed with relief. Thankfully, they didn't call him to the board of directors with a report. They limited it to a visit from one of the owners, considering it a minor incident. The director's hands literally burned from that bag of scalpels that he himself took out of the storeroom and hid at his summer house. He didn't feel like returning the tools back. He would think later about how to sell them. At the same moment, Scott and Nina were eating breakfast in silence. Both were unspeakably puzzled by yesterday's incomprehensible adventures. Besides, the nurse didn't really remember anything. She couldn't tell them what all these strange circumstances were. They arrived at the hospital together in Dr. Clem's car, which, surprisingly, didn't cause any furore. Everyone was looking at Dr. Clem, and he even began to puzzle over what could have happened there. Scott was glad to be called to the director. He wanted some clarity. Mr. Garrett immediately put forward absolutely incredible accusations of shameful theft, providing as evidence a whole movie about Dr. Clem's adventures in the storeroom. At the doctor's request, he called Nina, but she only blinked her eyes, saying that she didn't remember anything about being in the warehouse. She couldn't confirm or deny anything. She also refused to admit writing the note that Dr. Clem kept mentioning. The surgeon was shocked. What scalpels? What theft? But Mr. Garrett didn't even want to listen to him. He threatened that he would escalate the case if Dr. Clem did not write a letter of resignation right away. At the end of the conversation, he gloatingly added, "I will actively make sure that you leave us with a proper recommendation. No medical institution in the capital will want to see you in their ranks. There's no place for people like you in medicine. You are now nobody, and your name is nothing. Get it through your head, Mr. Clem." Some might consider Scott's further behaviour as weakness, infantilism, even a certain cowardice. Others will understand his pride and not condemn him. Dr. Clem knew for sure that he had not taken any scalpels from the storeroom at the clinic. Moreover, he had not even seen them yet. But to argue, to prove something, to fight for his honourable name, he refused. He suddenly felt such a universal moral and physical fatigue that his legs were shaking. He wrote a statement in no time at all, gathered his meagre personal belongings from his locker, and went home. Nina, who rushed after him with an attempt to justify herself, he sharply pushed away from his car. "Leave me alone, for God's sake! You've already done everything you could for me. Farewell!" The intricacies of fate, human vices, low deeds. Life is teeming with all these gifts of fulfillment. You can't make plans for tomorrow, even if today you're the best at what you do. Scott felt in his gut that something in this story wasn't clean, but he suddenly did not want to unravel this intricate tangle around his person. He wanted to start his life again with a clean slate. Outside the window, the capital was bustling, hurrying, living a full life. But now it seemed alien, indifferent, cold for Scott. The new apartment with its stylish design, and even his fancy car, became joyless. The man realized that in this city nothing happens for nothing. Everything had cause and effect relationships. Scott himself did not expect such quickness from himself. However, he quickly sold his apartment and started packing to leave that city. Nina tried to call him a couple of times, but he didn't answer. He did not want to cross paths with anyone from his past life, in any format. He didn't hold a grudge against her, even smiled to himself, thinking, "My poor shadow admirer, she'll have to assist other surgeons now, and I'm out of the medical business." He did not want to give up his favourite profession forever, but he did not look for a place in the capital, especially after the director's promises that he would now be on the blacklist of applicants for any medical positions. In the evening, when Scott was packing up the apartment, the phone suddenly rang loudly in his pocket. It was his restless classmate from medical school, Sam. The guys had once mastered surgery together at the department. A long-time friend invited him to his anniversary, joyfully asking, "Scott, is 35 years old scary? You've already passed this date a couple of months ago. Share your experience. By the way, I'm expecting you this weekend. No refusals accepted." Dr. Clem grinned. It's not the time to be travelling, but then again, who's to stop me? I'm a free bird now. Perhaps my old friend from university days in the city will have a job for me. Mr. Garrett's tentacles surely haven't reached so far. He didn't hesitate long. 3 days later, the former renowned plastic surgeon was on his way to the city on the other side of the country. The anniversary party at Sam's house was a roaring success. Drinks flowed like a river, and appetizers were in abundance. Scott wanted to postpone the conversation about job prospects with his comrade for later, but Sam started it himself. There is a settlement of 5,000 people 15 kilometres from the city. The medical centre in the village can't cope. They would never even dream of recruiting a doctor from the capital, let alone finding regional specialists. You could try working there for a while. Why not? The salary isn't bad. The social benefits are good. But to work there, you need to be a multi-skilled medical professional. Thus, a week later, Dr. Clem began working as a paramedic, surgeon, and general medical specialist in the settlement. Meanwhile, Nina was beside herself with guilt over Dr. Clem's recent misfortunes. The surgeon stubbornly ignored her calls. His apartment door remained locked, the dwelling showing no signs of life. Even spending a whole night on the cold steps of his building, hoping to catch him, proved fruitless. Dr. Clem never appeared. Nina, usually quiet and composed, was a changed woman. Anger simmered within her. She vowed to uncover who had fabricated the case against Scott, a case that reeked of criminal intent. She questioned why, if her idol had truly stolen expensive medical equipment, everything had been handled without involving the police. Arguments about private clinics keeping incidents internal failed to convince her. Meanwhile, a week after Dr. Clem's dismissal, a new surgeon, Marcus Warren, joined the team. No one in the clinic even knew that he was Mr. Garrett's brother-in-law. Both of them kept a cold demeanour in public, no hint of kinship. The clinic staff quickly formed their opinion about the newcomer in the smoking room. "He's a slippery character, reminds me of a slug," remarked one of the nurses. "And did you notice his shifty eyes? He never looks you in the face," a doctor added. All agreed that Dr. Clem had been cut from a different cloth. Nina instinctively kept her distance from the enigmatic Dr. Warren. His sudden appearance at the clinic struck her as suspicious. Realizing she couldn't handle the investigation alone, Nina requested the head of security. "I know that you and Dr. Clem were friends. I love him with all my heart, and I can't accept my colleague's indifference and detachment, their every man for himself attitude. Scott was clearly framed, and everyone just shrugged it off, as if we hadn't lost a talented surgeon. Any of us could be next. Are they all just protecting their own comfortable positions?" Craig was taken aback, but he agreed, breaking the chief physician's orders. "I don't like this whole rotten business with Scott either, but the facts seem indisputable. I've seen the CCTV footage myself." "If you know anything more about that day, please tell me," the nurse pleaded. "I want to find Dr. Clem. I feel terribly guilty that I failed him, that I couldn't protect him. I want to restore justice. Do you know anything about where he mysteriously disappeared to?" Craig pondered for a while, then spoke his thoughts aloud. "I haven't tried contacting him yet, but I will do so. If I manage to find out anything, I'll share that information with you." With that, they parted ways. Nina hurried to the operating room, where she was to assist the unfamiliar Dr. Warren for the first time. But work is work. The day before, Mr. Garrett had an interesting private conversation with his brother-in-law. He instructed Marcus to find buyers for high-quality scalpels. The surgeon, new to his job, didn't ask any unnecessary questions. He just nodded silently, agreeing to do everything. A plan immediately formed in his mind, which he began to execute that very evening. Dr. Marcus Warren was an avid internet user, believing the virtual universe could solve any problem. True to his conviction, after just half an hour online, he posted several ads offering medical instruments for sale. He set good prices and made the specifications tempting. Heading off to dinner with a sense of accomplishment, he didn't expect the World Wide Web's response to be almost instantaneous. Only 2 lines appeared on his screen. Ready to buy the whole set in bulk. The next day, Marcus reported to his superiors that the deal was settled. Jack Garrett realized he'd have to go to his summer house to bring the scalpels to his brother-in-law. He had already told the clinic owners that the equipment wasn't found and that Dr. Clem had left in an unknown direction. He'd fervently persuaded management not to raise a fuss, arguing that many of the surgeon's clients were famous dignitaries. The cost of the equipment wasn't worth risking the institution's reputation. His arguments were accepted, and the scalpels lay peacefully in his house, biding their time. The sale was set for Saturday. Dr. Warren and the goods arrived to a country house to meet a buyer. The man was pleased with the chosen place. Fewer prying eyes. Why draw unnecessary attention? What followed wasn't so pleasant. At the gate stood a tall, menacing fellow with cold eyes. "Are you the one peddling knives? Well, come inside then, let's talk." Marcus Warren was no naive simpleton. He'd seen enough crime dramas. He immediately realized he was being invited into the house of some local criminal authority. But he owed Jack for getting him a good job. That's why he agreed to this unclear affair, deciding he'd repay that debt in full. Inside, Marcus Warren involuntarily smiled. The host, just like in the movies, sat at a generously set table. He gestured for the guest to join him, poured a shot of cognac and moved closer. Dr. Warren downed the amber liquid in one gulp and looked boldly into the man's piercing eyes. The buyer maintained a long pause before finally speaking. "My people have learned everything about you, Dr. Warren. The goods look good. I'll pay as promised. But I'm more interested in a longer acquaintance with an expert like you. My guys are hotheads. They get injured often. You could patch them up. I'll put you on a good salary, on top of what you make at the clinic. What I need from you is to always be available, to show up wherever and whenever we call, and keep our deal in secret. Do these terms suit you?" Marcus Warren was taken aback, but ambition and greed quickly overcame his doubts. He saw no danger in this proposal. Who would harm a doctor, even in the criminal world? The gang needed him alive and well. For appearance's sake, he asked for a day to think it over, but his mind was made up. He would accept this tempting offer. The parties parted, satisfied with each other. The next day, Dr. Warren texted back his agreement. Then began his routine at the clinic, where things were far from smooth. Clients didn't want to schedule appointments with him. They all remembered Dr. Clem's golden touch. The clinic's income began to plummet, and the owners were ready to forgive talented surgeon for the missing tools to increase the cash flow. So, at the next board meeting, Mr. Garrett was tasked with finding Dr. Clem and bringing him back. The head of security again received a delicate task: to find traces of Dr. Clem at all costs, to visit his mother, to scour his friends and ex-lovers. It seemed impossible that Dr. Clem hadn't been in touch with anyone for months. Craig decided to visit Scott's mother in another city. He invited Nina with him, and she responded to his request with great enthusiasm. Her heart still bled. She confided in her mother, "I would follow him to the ends of the earth. Where he goes, I go. But he passed me by as if I were invisible. God, how I love him." Her mother stroked her daughter's head, assuring her that life was full of surprises and that her daughter would meet her soulmate. Just not this one. Nina bristled. You don't understand. I don't want anyone else. At Dr. Clem's mother, luck was on their side. The woman saw no ulterior motive in their visit, and sensing something in Nina's anguished eyes, she revealed where her son now lived and worked. As she served them tea, the woman lamented, How time flies! It's almost been a year since Scott went there for a few days and ended up staying. He won't even consider returning to the capital. Perhaps you can convince him it's a mistake. He's so talented. On the way home, Nina agreed with Craig not to disclose Scott's whereabouts. Let their cunning boss handle all the mess with his superiors. They wouldn't let a good man down. At home, Nina broke down in tears. Her hope that Dr. Clem would return to the capital had become a distant dream. Her mother, lost in thought after the story, suddenly asked to repeat the name of the village where Scott lived now. Nina answered, and the woman clapped her hands in astonishment. Nina, this can't be. Such coincidences don't just happen. My parents once lived in that settlement. They worked at the breeding experimental vegetable station. Both were agronomists. My father made an important discovery. I was just a little girl when he was called to the capital to work at a specialized research laboratory. We've been here ever since. I married late. You were born, then your siblings. There's more, daughter. Mr. Garrett's ancestors are from there too. When I worked in your centre's accounting department, we got to talking, and that's how we found out. And that's why he helped you to get a job there. It was our shared roots, the memories of our small homeland. What a small world we live in. Our grandfathers' graves are still there. I've never been back. Meanwhile, Jack Garrett listened to the report of the surgeon's disappearance with indignation, shouting, Craig, this isn't a needle in a haystack, and he didn't go abroad. Find him at any cost. Craig bravely deflected these attacks. Besides, Jack, already neck-deep in this mess, didn't want to dig any deeper either. He pretended to take action, but let everything slide. Only the owners of the clinic were dissatisfied with the result, but even they had more pressing matters. In the quagmire of daily hospital routine, another year passed almost unnoticed, but still there was no news from Dr. Clem. Nina celebrated her 35th birthday in proud solitude, at least in terms of romantic companionship. The years slipped by in a futile longing she could do nothing about. She found no joy in the courtship attempts of various suitors. After her birthday, she quitted unexpectedly, claiming she'd found a quieter workplace, better suited for her family. A reserved person, she was soon forgotten by her colleagues, who never had reason to doubt her competence during her many years of service. After a couple of days of gossips about her sudden leaving, everyone returned to their routines. Dr. Warren had found his footing and finally excelled at plastic surgeries. He received faithful payment for his rare house calls to the criminal authority. He'd treat and monitor patients as needed, ensuring no complications arose. It was a good arrangement. He'd make a couple of house calls a month, and the money would appear in his account like clockwork. Who wouldn't enjoy such a setup? He grew plump, constantly spoiling his wife and children with expensive gifts and taking them to resorts. Everything seemed set to continue smoothly, but, as the saying goes, you can only stretch a string so far before it snaps. However, before an unexpected turn of events, another year flew by. An argument erupted in one of the capital's mansions. The participants were the same man who had once arranged for Dr. Clem to work at the plastic surgery clinic, and his ever-present beautiful girlfriend. He neither knew how nor wanted to refuse her slightest requests. This woman was his secret weakness. Now she demanded he find Dr. Clem, even if he had to dig him up from underground. She wanted to enhance her figure, and, if the mood struck, improve the shape of her cheeks and chin. But Dr. Clem wasn't answering her persistent calls. For the first time, the mighty man was at a loss. Then there was the murky theft story, which he, as one of the clinic's co-owners, certainly knew about. He knew about it and didn't believe that a surgeon could be involved in anything shady, but before, he hadn't had time to look into it. Having thought over his beloved's request, the man finally decided to unravel this long-standing story. He didn't inform his partners in the business of his plans, but went to an old friend with whom he had been in juvenile detention. Their paths later diverged, but they maintained a strong connection. Over good cognac and delicacies, the old friends were surprised to discover that the threads in the case of the disappearing scalpels led not to Dr. Clem, but to the current doctor of the criminal authority. That night, Marcus Warren learned that his criminal superiors were far from angelic in his approach to solving issues. So, Marcus quickly spilled his guts about being the clinic director's brother-in-law, and that he had asked him to help sell expensive medical equipment. The criminal authority smirked and winked at his old friend. You see how quickly we solve all the dark questions? The answers are found almost immediately. Punishment for injustice comes like a boomerang. A very good surgeon, you say? I wouldn't refuse to have such a doctor in my team. And you, Marcus, go and report your chief. We need to restore the doctor's honourable name in medical circles. I like things to be fair. Toward morning, Jack Garrett's doorbell rang. It was his brother-in-law with broken fingers, bandages and wild eyes. From the threshold, he began whispering to his relative and boss that he'd better leave, that everything was terrible, that serious people wanted to deal with him, to restore the former status of the brilliant surgeon to Dr. Clem. The director of the clinic barely managed to make out this confused monologue, and when he realized what was going on, he said, "What a fool! That's what I get through my sister's request to hire you where the money flows. You were never a good surgeon, Marcus, and you've been hiding from me for so long that you're working on criminals. Now get out of my sight. Don't go to the police and convince your second employer to not name me anywhere. I'll disappear with my family for a while." Coincidences in our lives actually happen much more often than Nina's mother thought. Not knowing anything about where the surgeon he had dismissed had been living for almost 3 years, Jack Garrett also decided to direct his footsteps to the same settlement on the other side of the country. He had relatives there. The place was well hidden from unnecessary curiosity, deep, picturesque, surrounded by mountains. Just the right place to heal wounds and hide. Jack told his wife and son that he was tired of travelling to warm countries. He wanted to see their country and visit his relatives. 2 days and 10 hours on the road. A trifle of life compared to the threatening danger. With about 5 hours of driving left to the settlement, Jack's son started to get motion sickness, vomited, refused to eat and became weak. When they arrived at the settlement, the boy's temperature spiked and he began to complain of sharp, strong pains in his abdomen. It became clear that all the symptoms strongly resembled acute appendicitis or even peritonitis. Jack stopped a passerby and asked about any doctor here. "Recently, the new clinic has been built. It's over there, 2 blocks straight. A surgeon works there, a local celebrity. The whole town rushes to this doctor if a case is serious or doubtful. He has already pulled so many people back from the brink of death." Mr. Garrett calmed down a little. The small 2-story hospital building shone with the fresh plaster of snow-white walls. Around the blue-painted porch were 2 flower beds. Everything was so near, as if it were a toy. A man sat with his back to the door at the reception desk. "My son is not well. Leave all your business now and attend to the patient." The white uniformed doctor turned slowly at the voice. Scott Clem, the former head doctor of the capital's plastic surgery centre, was looking at Mr. Garrett. The legs of the man shook as he realised he could lose. His son's life was at stake and he had nowhere to turn for help. His boy might die from the inflammatory process that had already begun. The silence seemed like an eternity to Scott's former boss, but in reality it lasted only a few seconds. Then everything sprang into motion, filled with sounds. Dr. Clem quickly examined the boy, nodded soothingly to the man who had once greatly dishonoured him, and ordered, "Prepare the operating room. Suspected acute appendicitis. Check blood type, coagulation, RH factor, and run all biochemistry. We have very little time." The boy was taken away, and his father's legs could barely support him. Scott Clem, before leaving, said to someone, "Honey, give the patient's father a sedative injection. I don't want him to have a heart attack. We can't handle 2 emergencies at once." "Okay, dear, I'll do it right away." Mr. Garrett felt a sense of déjà vu. His former nurse, Nina, now stood before him with a syringe and cotton swab, her face stony as she performed her medical duty, clearly struggling to maintain composure. She gritted her teeth and said, "You can relax. In my husband's hands, everyone gets better because he's a doctor from God, unlike you, who came to medicine from hell." Nina was right. Dr. Clem was just in time. In a couple of hours, Jack Garrett and his wife were even allowed to look into the ward where their son had been brought after surgery. That same evening, the doctor and his devoted nurse walked home together, joking.
"Did you see the look on that creep's face when we appeared to him like ghosts? He was in shock,"
Scott said with a smile. "Well, no more shocked than you were when my mum, brothers and I showed up on your doorstep and said, 'We have nowhere to spend the night, Dr. Clem. Won't you shelter this poor family, for old time's sake, while we find a place to live?'"
"Come on,"
said Scott, embarrassed. "There's never been a more devoted person in my life than you. I realised it the moment I saw you at my door. Now it's only together and forever. I don't want to go back to the capital, not under any circumstances, for any reason, or for any amount of money. There are different people and different air there. Nina, why are you suddenly pale? Are you feeling ill again?" Nina laughed, looking gently at Scott. "You're a doctor. You know that in the first trimester of pregnancy, sickness is almost inevitable."
"I love you, Nina. You're my miracle."
"And I love you too." Since her childhood, Maya had been an unlucky child. Everything went wrong for her. She often lost things, was always late, and at exams she picked the questions she knew the least about. After school, she failed to get into the college of her dreams, and out of desperation went to study to be a chef. After culinary school, Maya worked at a cafe near her home, but with her bad luck, she didn't stay long. She was fired due to a considerable shortage of food, although it was not her fault. However, she was an excellent cook, especially with pastries. On the advice of her friend Ainsley, Maya decided to bake goods at home to order. Surprisingly, her small business grew quickly, and soon she had a queue of customers. After her mother's death, the care of her father fell entirely on Maya's shoulders. Despite being only 67, her father had serious health problems and rarely left the house. Maya loved her father very much. He was the closest person to her, always supportive, and tried to understand his unfortunate daughter.
"Maya, I really want to see you get married and give me grandchildren,"
he used to say to his daughter. "Dad, who am I going to marry? The first man I meet?"
"You should look closely. You have Ainsley. Maybe she knows some single guys.
Daddy, when the time comes, I'll get married. I'm in no hurry.
You may have time, but I don't have much left. I'd like to see my grandson or granddaughter, and I want to know that you're in a decent hand, her father pleaded.
You'll see, Daddy, you'll see. You still have plenty of time. You're still quite young, Maya reassured him. However, the woman realized her father was right and time was running out. She was already 28, and there was no one decent on the horizon. One day, Maya had a cake to deliver. She hurried as fast as she could to the address. Usually the customers picked up their orders, but today was an exception, and Maya had to deliver the cake to the birthday boy. The guy who ordered it was in a cast and was expecting guests. He couldn't pick up his cake and probably didn't want to bother his relatives or friends. Maya rang the doorbell and heard, "Come in, it's open." She timidly entered and looked around. With my luck, the only thing left is to run into a crazy person, thought Maya as she walked into the living room. A guy was sitting on the couch. One of his legs was in a cast and the other was wrapped in bandages. It was clear that getting up to open the door was a real problem for him. "Hello, did you order a cake?" "Yes, I did. I'm sorry to have to bother you and ask for a delivery, but you see the situation." He pointed to his feet. "Car accident. Now I'm still recovering." "Oh, what a pity. What do the doctors say? Will you walk again?" Maya asked. "Yes, of course, but only in a couple of months." "Do you live alone? Maybe you need some help," Maya suggested. The guy looked at Maya in surprise. "It's wonderful. In this day and age, a stranger offering to help." "What's surprising about it? It seems normal to me. We're human and should be kind and helpful to each other. So, do you need help?" "To be honest, a lot," the guy admitted, embarrassed. "What do you need? Tell me." "Nothing right now, but if you could come a couple of times a week to go grocery shopping and clean up, I'd pay you. My mum lives far away and I don't want to bother her. Besides, I don't want to stay in the same apartment with her for a few months," laughed the stranger. "She's a former prosecutor. She's something, I tell you." "I see. I sympathize. When do you need me to come over?" "Let's do it the day after tomorrow, around 11 o'clock. Can you make it?" "Yes, that's a convenient time." "How much will you charge?" "Nothing," said Maya honestly. "I'm not going to charge you. I'm just going to help you as a human being." The guy looked at her again in surprise, then looked her over from head to toe. "I don't know whether to call you amazing or weird." "I prefer the first option," Maya smiled. A pretty young woman willing to work as a housekeeper for free for a strange guy. A paradox, honestly. "So let's get acquainted. What's your name?" Maya asked. "Oh, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Brian." "Look, Brian, my parents taught me that people need to be helped. It doesn't matter how old they are or what gender they are. If a person needs help, it's just the way things are. I'm just helping for free. If you don't like my candidacy, no problem, I won't come." "No, on the contrary, I'm delighted with your candidacy. I'm just amazed by your humanity and kindness. And I apologize if I've offended you in any way. Come on Friday. I'll be waiting for you." "Okay, I'll be there Friday at 11. "Thank you. I'll be waiting for you." And then it hit Maya. "Oh, it's your birthday today. I congratulate you. I wish you a speedy recovery and the most positive emotions in your life. The main thing is that you're alive and relatively healthy. The bones will heal, and you can move on with your life." "Thank you. You're an optimist, aren't you?" "I don't know, but one must always believe in the best and appreciate what one has. Have a lovely day. See you on Friday.
See you, and thanks again.
On Friday, Maya came to Brian as promised, did the cleaning, went to the store for groceries and prepared food for a few days. Brian watched her actions admiringly and marvelled at her speed in the kitchen.
You should work as a restaurant, as a cook, he said.
Oh, no, thanks. I've already worked there. I've had enough of that.
Bad experience?
Yeah, terrible.
But there are other places. Maybe you should try it, as you've got the talent.
You know, I was going to get a job at another place, but then, on the advice of a friend of mine, I started baking home. There are enough clients. I earn quite well, so why should I work for someone else if I work perfectly well for myself?
In principle, it makes sense. If you earn enough, why not?
And what do you do?
I also work, but not for myself, but for a company. We develop computer programs.
They chatted a little more, and then Maya went home. But since that day, she began coming to Brian 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday and Friday. It was difficult for her, because the orders were scheduled for several weeks, but she could not refuse, seeing that the man needed her help. He could, of course, temporarily hire a nurse or an au pair, but it would take time to find a trustworthy person. Well, he needed help now. Besides, for some reason, Maya was very pleased to communicate with him. That's why Maya firmly decided she would go to him until Brian's cast was removed. Meanwhile, the longer she talked to him, the more she was attracted to this guy. Their communication was easy and simple. Brian told many interesting stories. She listened with her mouth open and didn't notice how she fell in love. Her father realized almost immediately that his daughter was in love. Maya, he turned to her, who at that moment was making the cream for the cake. Maya, baby, can you hear me? But Maya was lost in her fantasies and did not hear that her father had called her several times already. He got up from his chair and touched her arm. Are you all right? Her father worried. Yes, I'm fine. I need to finish the cream and run to Brian's. It's Wednesday. To Brian's? I see. Dad smiled and didn't say anything else. Maya happily got to the 3rd floor. She had baked a bento cake for Brian yesterday and was rushing to please him with a treat. He was a big sweet tooth. Entering the apartment, she saw a young woman sitting next to Brian and telling him something emotionally. Good afternoon, Maya greeted. The stranger turned around and looked at Maya. Brian, I'm going to go. I won't interfere with your housekeeper while she cleans. I'll drop by one of these days. Don't miss me, honey. She leaned over, kissed Brian on the cheek and headed out. Maya felt a hard pang of jealousy. She wanted to throw the cake at this young lady who dared to kiss her Brian, but she restrained herself and simply asked, Is this your girlfriend? No, it's a co-worker who came to visit me, Brian answered calmly. I see. Do you always kiss your co-workers? Maya could not resist the question, and Brian was clearly surprised by it. Is there a problem with that? He asked, clearly teasing her. No, I was just asking. But I think someone here is jealous. Brian smiled. He was flattered by Maya's reaction to the other woman's presence. Jealous? Why would she be? Brian raised himself on his left leg, which was already free of bandages, and leisurely walked up close to Maya. And I see the way you're looking at me, he whispered to her, and Maya felt a lump in her throat with excitement. Are you saying you don't like me and don't care who comes to visit me? No, I care, Maya said barely audibly, but deep inside she scolded herself. What are you doing? You shouldn't say anything about your feelings, even if you want to. She barely restrained herself from kissing him because he was so close as never before. But Brian took the initiative, leaned over, and tenderly kissed Maya. The kiss was the kind that makes you dizzy and weakens your legs.
A kiss after which you want to continue. And Maya wanted to, and Brian did too. He took Maya's hand and led her to the bedroom. An hour later, Maya looked happily and contentedly at Brian. Now, she was only worried about one question. What would happen next? "Don't you think we rushed things?" she asked finally, hoping he would deny it, but Brian was silent, and that scared Maya. She didn't know what he was thinking or what to say, so she just waited. "It seems to me," Brian began, and Maya tensed, anticipating something that would make her feel bad. "You would move in with me. What do you think?" "What do you mean, move in?" Maya didn't understand. "In the most direct sense. Let's live together." It sounded so simple. Maya felt a little offended, as if he had suggested they go to the movies, not live together. She wondered, "Brian, have you ever been in a serious relationship?" "Yes, I and my ex-girlfriend lived together for 2 years, and then she left for someone else. Apparently he was better than me," Brian said sadly. "I wouldn't have left you." "I know." "How?" Maya wondered. "There's no one like you on this planet. You're a unique girl. That's why I want you to live with me." "I thought you wanted to live with me because you love me." Maya was offended. "Well, that goes without saying." The phrase sounded simple, without feeling or emotion, but Maya didn't notice. She considered it a declaration of love and was glad that Brian loved her. "I'll just have to talk to my dad. I'll talk to him tonight, and tomorrow I'll pack my things and move in with you." "Oh," Maya suddenly remembered, "I have to take all my belongings and give my new address to my clients. You won't mind if I continue my business at your place?" "Maya, don't talk nonsense. Not at my place, but at our place. It's your home now too, and why should I mind you doing what you love? I'll go to work too. That's fine. I only have one condition." The last sentence sounded stern and serious. Maya tensed up. "What is it?" she asked, confused and not knowing what to expect. "Will you bake your charming cakes for me too?" Brian laughed. "Phew, you startled me. Of course I will," Maya smiled. When she got home, Maya immediately informed her father that she would now be staying with Brian. But he was not pleased about this. "Why doesn't he call you to marry? I don't like all this. But you're an adult and it's your decision." "Daddy, don't worry, everything will be fine. The main thing is that we love each other." "I don't believe in strong feelings when things happen so fast." "But it was you who wanted me to get married and give you a grandson or granddaughter. What's wrong now?" "You're not getting married. You're just going to live with him." "We're definitely getting married." Maya lied. "We've talked about it. We just need to make some money. Brian hasn't worked in so long, and a wedding is very costly." "I have money. I've been saving for your wedding." "Daddy, I'm begging you, don't push me. I promise you everything will be fine. We'll get married." "All right, do what you want. You're an adult. I trust you." "Thank you. That's why I love you so much." The next day, Maya moved in with Brian. And after 3 days, he finally took off the cast. Life went on as scheduled. Work, home, work. Brian spent a lot of time at work, often late, but the salary was very decent. After a couple of months, he suggested that Maya study for a driver's license. "Why do I need a license? I don't have a car," Maya reasoned. "So let's buy you a car," Brian suggested. "It will be more convenient for you to deliver orders and buy groceries. You can increase the number of orders that way." Maya looked at Brian in surprise. "I'm at the stove all day. If I increase the orders, I'll sleep at the stove." "Come on, don't make that up. Look, I'm at work all day and come in late. You can make not 2, but 4 cakes a day. That's twice as much profit. I think you should earn while you can and save for the future.
I'll think about it, Maya agreed. Time went on. The number of orders was growing fast, and it was getting harder and harder to work at home. Maya decided to talk to her dad about it. Daddy, I have a serious talk for you.
What is it? Are you getting married?
Dad asked hopefully. No, not yet. I wanted to ask you for a loan. My business is expanding. It's no longer realistic to fulfill all the orders at home. I want to rent a space, and I'll pay you back as soon as I make money.
Maya, I collected this money for your most important day in life, not for business. I'm sorry.
Daddy, are you serious?
Absolutely, I'm sorry, but with your luck, you shouldn't start a business. That's my opinion.
But I already have business. I'll just change the place, and that's it.
That's your right, but I won't give you any money for it, only for wedding.
Maya was offended. So her father doesn't believe in her at all. Maybe he's right, and she shouldn't expand. With her luck, she could lose everything. But if you're afraid of everything, nothing will ever work out. So Maya decided to talk to Brian about taking out a loan, but to her surprise, he was also strongly against it. Why do you need a space? Can you explain? Don't you have enough space here? During the whole day, I am not at home. The apartment is all yours. Why waste money on nonsense? I don't cook all over the apartment, only in the kitchen, and it's small. I don't have room to store all I need. Maya tried to explain. You used to have enough space here before. Anyway, I don't want to fight about it. But if you want my opinion, I'm totally against the loan. Not getting any support from anyone, Maya resigned herself to it. Her mood was ruined because she was so fired up about the idea of expansion. She had already imagined how she would grow to her own pastry shop and become known throughout the city, but it was not to be. The next day, Maya woke up completely shattered. She felt nauseous and had no energy at all. This continued for several days, and finally, Brian persuaded her to go to the clinic, where Maya learned that she was pregnant. Brian took the news calmly and without emotion. We need to get married, he said just as calmly. Need to? You mean if it weren't for the pregnancy, we wouldn't have gotten married? Maya clarified. Why would we? Everything is fine with us. A stamp in my passport doesn't affect my attitude towards you in any way. Do people get married only because of the stamp in their passport? Maya wondered. I have no idea why people get married. Probably so that the children have official parents. You have a peculiar understanding of weddings, Maya wondered. I always thought people get married because they love each other and want to be together for life. And who's stopping them from being together if they're not married? Is it against the law to live together without marriage? No, but it's an entirely different status. Maya tried to persuade her lover, but to no avail. Maya, enough already. We have to get married and we'll get married. No problem. A month later, they had a wedding. There were few guests, only 20 people. The day before the wedding, Maya met her future mother-in-law, who clearly did not like her. Do not worry about it at all, Brian reassured. She will go to her city in 2 days after the wedding, and you will only hear her sometimes on the phone. My mum is a hard person. Even I cannot find a common language with her, so a negative attitude towards you is quite expected. As Brian said, Maya's mother-in-law left in a few days and everything went back to normal. About 3 weeks after the wedding, Maya needed to deliver another order. The cake was huge and she carried it with difficulty up the stairs. Suddenly, she stumbled and fell with the cake. A sharp pain in her stomach twisted Maya in half. Following Maya up the stairs was a woman who immediately called an ambulance. The result of the fall was the loss of the baby. Maya was in shock. Why?
Why am I so unlucky? Will it ever end? I can't take it any more. As soon as something good happens, an endless stream of bad luck follows. Maya cried, lying in the ward. Brian visited his wife a couple of times and told her not to get upset and that there would be children. Maybe this isn't the time, he suggested. Maya looked at her husband with tearful eyes. How is it not the time? When is the time? Don't you care at all? No, of course I'm upset too. It's just that I realise no matter what, we have to move on. If we can't change the situation, then we have to change our attitude. Brian, I didn't lose my purse or scratch my car. I lost our baby, our little man, yours and mine. How can you talk about it like that? Tears streamed from her eyes, full of grief and resentment. Maya understood that a man can't comprehend what a woman feels at such a moment, but to talk about losing a child like losing a mitten was too much. Go away. I want to be alone. After 3 days, Maya was discharged home, but she was different. She seemed to have grown up overnight. Her carefree cheerfulness had vanished, and she didn't want to do anything. This lasted nearly 7 months. Clients gradually disappeared because Maya refused everyone and didn't want to make cakes anymore. Maya, what are you doing? Cakes are your favourite thing. Ainsley tried to support her friend. I can't. I always have plenty of orders for children's birthday cakes, and I can't, you know, Maya said and started to cry. It was painful to see her like this. Something had to be done to get her out of this state, and Ainsley called Brian. Listen, you need to take her somewhere on vacation, a change of scenery. She needs positive emotions. I can't. I have an important project. What's more important to you? Your wife or your project? My wife and the project. Listen, why don't you go on vacation with her? Huh? Wherever you want, I'll pay for it. Ainsley was stunned by the offer. On one hand, she wouldn't refuse a vacation at someone else's expense, but on the other, she realised that her friend needed her husband's support. Though in this case, maybe friendly support would be better. Okay, I'll think about it and talk to Maya. I'll let you know later. Ainsley managed to persuade Maya to go on vacation. She chose Hawaii for the vacation because she had long dreamed of going there. Brian paid for the trip for his wife and Ainsley, and the friends flew to the islands. The vacation did Maya good. She calmed down and seemed to let go of the situation a little. Maya, I understand that it's hard for you, said Ainsley. Yes, I don't understand how hard, but you have to move on somehow. You have a father who is distressed about you, and Brian depends on you a lot, so you have to be strong. Yeah, I guess you're right. I need to pull myself together and move forward. It's not like I can change the situation anyway. 2 weeks flew by quickly, and the results were obvious. Maya returned home, thinking about what she could cook to please her husband and show him that she was almost the same as before. But upon entering the apartment, Maya saw another woman's shoes. Weird, Brian's at work. He should be there. Maybe he hired someone to clean the apartment for my arrival, Maya wondered. She made her way to the kitchen. There was a bottle, 2 glasses, and a plate of fruit on the table. It didn't seem like the presence of a cleaning lady. Suddenly Maya heard unmistakable sounds coming from the bedroom and went in that direction. More than anything, she wanted to see one of Brian's friends with his girlfriend. More than anything, she wanted to see one of Brian's friends, not a girlfriend. She opened the door and froze. Brian was with the same co-worker who had visited during his sick leave. What's going on here? Maya asked loudly, startling at the couple. You're back? Brian asked fearfully. You're supposed to fly in tomorrow, aren't you? No. Our trip ended and the plane was today. I told you. Maya replied calmly.
though she was in shock and barely understood what was happening. Brian got up from the bed, threw on his shirt and approached his wife. "You know, I'm actually glad you caught us. I'm tired of hiding. Rochelle and I have been in a relationship for a long time, but she was married. Now she divorced. You and I have nothing to do with each other anymore. So I'm leaving." "What an abomination. Ugh, I'm disgusted to even look at you. I never thought I'd live with such a moral freak." Maya turned around and left the apartment, slamming the door loudly. She walked down the stairs and cried, "I'm not just unlucky, I'm cursed, I guess. God, why are you doing this to me?" She had no other words or questions. Maya came out of the entrance and sat on a bench. She didn't understand how to move forward or where to go. To her father? And what to say? That she is a complete failure? She couldn't even find a decent husband? Maya took out her cell phone and dialed Ainsley's number. "Hi, can I come over?" "Dear, what's wrong?" Ainsley asked, realizing that something terrible had happened. "I left Brian, or, more precisely, he left me for his mistress. I just caught them in her apartment, or rather, his apartment." "What a nightmare! Come, of course, I'm waiting." Ainsley stood by the window waiting for her friend. Why is she so unlucky? Just when things were starting to get better, here we go again. What should I say to her now? What words should I use to comfort her? Maya went up to the apartment and, looking at her friend, sobbed loudly. Ainsley cried with her. Her heart was torn with pity and compassion. She let Maya stay at her place for a couple of days, until she could at least somewhat come to her senses. "Maya, what are you going to do now?" "Go back home. Do I have any other options?" "Well, don't lose heart. I believe that everything will still be all right for you." Ainsley tried to support her friend. "You're an optimist," said Maya sadly, "but I don't believe in it. I think I don't belong in this world at all." "Ah, friend, don't you dare say that. You're already scaring me." Ainsley said, genuinely scared after Maya said that. "Listen, dear, let's get drunk. You need to relieve stress." "You know I don't like it." "Well, in your case, it'll be the cure. 2 glasses of good wine never hurt anyone. It'll help clear your head." "All right, let's do it," agreed Maya. "Then pack up and let's go to the store. I'm not leaving you alone." "Are you afraid I'll do something to myself?" "Don't worry, my father needs me. If it wasn't for him, I would have done something a long time ago," Maya said honestly. "Maya, I might be saying something stupid now, but look at the situation with Brian from another side. After all, he cheated on you from the beginning. Why would you want a husband like that? It's better to be alone than with such a man." "Do I have a choice? Or suitors? Or maybe I've had a lot of them." "Who cares how many you've had? I'm not married yet, either, so what? So I haven't met the right man yet. But I'm not going to marry the first guy I meet, am I?" "I don't know, Ainsley. I don't know." That night the friends got drunk. 3 glasses of wine were enough for Maya. The nervous tension had taken its toll. The next day she returned home to her father. At first he was very upset that Maya's family life was unsuccessful, and when he found out what Brian had done, he was glad that everything had cleared up so quickly. "So, you should be happy that it's all coming to light now. Imagine living with a man all his life and then finding out he had lived with 2 families all these years. You still have time to build a new relationship." "Daddy, where do I get a new relationship? With my luck, I can't even find a homeless guy, clean him up and live with him." "Don't be silly. You'll meet Mr. Right. I feel that you will, and very soon. If you remember, I didn't like this Brian right away." Days went by. Maya started waiting for Brian to call and say that he had changed his mind and wanted to live with her, to ask her to come back. But time passed and he didn't call. In 2 weeks, Maya found out that Brian had filed for divorce. Maya was devastated. She eagerly wanted to return to her husband, but didn't know how. "Ainsley, how can I get him back? Maybe go to his house and ask for forgiveness?" She turned to her friend for advice. "Ask for forgiveness for what?" Ainsley was shocked. "For being a bad wife, throwing tantrums after losing a child, crying a lot. He probably didn't like it all, got tired of it, and that's why he left for someone else." "Maya, wake up. He had that mistress all the time for years. Your tantrums have nothing to do with it."
"But I love him. I want him to be with me, not her," cried Maya.
"Look, Maya, no matter what you say or do, you can't force him to be with you. Remember that."
"I'll go to the divorce process and talk to him there. Maybe he'll change his mind about divorcing me."
"Dear, what are you saying? You must have some pride, Maya."
"I don't want to be proud. I want to be happy. And I won't be happy without him,"
Maya repeated stubbornly. "Do as you please. I'm sorry, but I'm tired of repeating the same thing to you," said Ainsley, who was tired of listening to this nonsense. The divorce was scheduled for 11:30. Maya had been anxious since morning. She woke up around 6, drank 3 cups of coffee, and didn't let the phone out of her hands, hoping that Brian would call and say he had changed his mind and the divorce was cancelled. But Brian didn't call, and hope was melting away every minute. Maya put on a pantsuit, styled her hair, but didn't put on makeup. Maybe if Brian sees her like this, he will feel sorry for her and change his mind. Maya went to the venue on complete autopilot. She stopped several times, deciding whether to go further. After all, if she didn't show up there, the divorce would be postponed, and she would have time to reconcile with her husband. Maya looked at her watch. It wasn't 11 o'clock yet. She sat down on a park bench near the necessary building. "Why, to cry so heavily?" she heard a woman's voice. Maya looked up. Across from her stood 2 women of strange appearance. One was wearing a dress, a hoodie, numerous bracelets and rings, and a bright necklace. The other looked equally unusual, a long skirt, a multicoloured shirt, and many pieces of jewellery on her arms. She had beads around her neck and dark glasses over her eyes. Maya felt uncomfortable. "Excuse me, are you saying that to me?" Maya asked. "To you, baby," said the woman, with the beads around her neck. "Why are you worrying so much? After all, you've already been through grief, and this is just a small thing." "How do you know?" Maya was surprised. "I know all about you. Would you like me to tell you?" "I have no money," warned Maya. "And who told you that I need money? I don't. The best reward for me is when people are happy. When you become rich, then you can pay me, if you'd like to." "Oh, don't make me laugh. Getting rich with my luck is out of the question. I can only go bankrupt." Maya smiled for some reason. She felt amused by these words. "Well, laugh. Laughter is better than tears. And as for your bad luck, that will soon pass. You better listen to what I have to say. You don't have to try to hold on to your husband. Let him go. Forgive him and let him go. Don't cling to the past or you'll miss the future, you know. You need to get a divorce and wish your ex-husband happiness. Only sincerely and from the heart. Only then will you meet your true love and be happy." "How do you know that? It sounds fantastic." "And you believe me, it will be. You have a very bright future waiting for you, happy and secure. But you have to let go of the past first." "I wish I knew how to do that," said Maya sadly. "It's elementary. Imagine your spouse and his mistress before your eyes. Mentally wish them happiness, sincerely from the heart. Let everything work out for them." Maya wondered how this woman knew so much about her and Brian. Suddenly, Maya thought that the women in front of her were actresses hired by the creative Ainsley to put on a show and make Maya believe that she didn't need Brian. "I see you doubt the veracity of my words," smiled the woman with beads on her neck. "Do you remember how in the 3rd grade you stole a beautiful pencil from the teacher's desk, and you never admitted it to anyone? I know you remember. After all, you are still tormented by this story." Maya blushed. She had never been so ashamed before. It was true. No one, not a single soul in the world, knew of this transgression of hers, for which she was truly ashamed. "Do you believe me now?" the woman smiled. "I do. I apologize." "Why are you apologizing? You have the right not to believe the first person you meet. That's fine. I just proved to you that I'm not a liar, of which there are many, by the way. Go, baby. You gotta go. And don't forget what I told you." "May I ask you another question?" Maya suddenly asked. "Yes, although I already know what you want to ask." "Don't worry. You'll have children, 2, and your father will see both grandchildren." That was quite a shock. This was something Maya hadn't expected. She'd seen things like this in movies, but it wasn't real. And here, in real life, such miracles happened. "Thank you so much. You have no idea how much you've helped me right now. Where can I find you?" Maya asked. "Why? If I need to, I'll find you myself." "Thank you so much." Go, it's already time, and don't worry. He'll be very sorry he did that to you," the woman said lastly. "Who, Brian?" Maya clarified. "Yes," replied the woman, and taking her companion standing next to her under her arm, walked on. Only then did Maya realize that the woman with the beads around her neck was blind. "Wow, I've never experienced such a thing before. I must tell Ainsley. She'll be amazed," thought Maya. She had already come to the building, but suddenly stopped, took a step to the side, and closed her eyes. The most hated image appeared in front of her eyes: her husband and his mistress. Maya calmly visualized their faces and mentally said 3 times in a row, "I'm letting you go. Be happy." And she suddenly felt better. "I wonder how it works. I didn't do anything. I just said the words, but it made me feel better. It's a paradox," thought Maya as she walked inside. Brian came to the meeting with Rochelle. For some reason, Maya felt amused by it, as if Rochelle was afraid to let him go alone to meet his wife. Without letting Brian utter a word, Maya said, "I totally agree with the divorce, and I wish my ex-spouse happiness from the bottom of my heart." After all the papers were signed, Brian approached Maya. "I didn't expect such an act from you. I was sure you would cause a scene and ask for time to reconcile. You're a wonderful woman. I told you that right away." He lowered his head and added quietly, "I'm sorry it happened and didn't work out." "That's okay. It's just an experience. Be happy, Brian. I'm sorry I have to go." "When are you going to get your stuff and give me the keys?" "One of these days I'll call you." Maya waved and walked towards the exit. She was in a great mood and felt incredibly light. Whether it was the effect of the blind woman's words or letting go of the situation was unknown, but Maya felt light and at peace for the first time in months since the loss of the child. She called Ainsley. "Hi, friend. What are you doing tonight?" "Hi." Ainsley was extremely surprised by Maya's good mood. She hadn't heard her so cheerful and happy in a long time. "How are you doing? Have you reconciled with your husband?" "No, I'm an officially divorced woman," answered Maya cheerfully. "Maya, what have you been drinking?" Ainsley asked, still puzzled. "No, where could I have been drinking?
I've just come out of my divorce meeting. Or do you think they serve champagne after a divorce?" Maya laughed.
"Then I don't understand why you're so pleased," Ainsley admitted frankly.
"Come to me and I'll tell you everything," Maya intrigued. "I'll cook something delicious. We can have an occasion. Expect you at 6. "Okay, deal," said Ainsley, and disconnected, and thought, maybe she's experiencing unreasonable joy from the stress. It happens. Very strange behaviour. But when Ainsley arrived at Maya's house in the evening and her friend told her everything, she was relieved about Maya's state of mind, although Ainsley was extremely surprised to hear about such an amazing fortune-teller. "I honestly don't believe in fortune-tellers and psychics. They are just good psychologists who can read our emotions and experiences and predict the future," Ainsley said. "No, Ainsley, I'm telling you, she's real. She told me something that no one could know and couldn't have guessed because I had long forgotten about it," Maya insisted. "That's why I believe her prophecy." "Well, let's see how it goes," agreed Ainsley, not wanting to argue and ruin her friend's mood. Maya went on with her life. Slowly she began to get her old clients back and acquire new ones. She signed up for a masterclass to improve her cake decorating skills and realized a long-time dream by buying a kitten named Marquis. Her father looked at his daughter and marveled. It was as if she had blossomed anew. "Maya, I'm so glad you're recovered from everything and are yourself again," he said to his daughter. "I want you to do well. You know, I've been thinking. Maybe I was wrong then, but I think that now you could rent for your own business." It was Maya's turn to be surprised. "Daddy, are you serious? You were against it." "Totally serious. Why not take risks while you're young?" "We'll have to find out and do the math. May I ask you something?" "Sure." "You didn't want to give the money because of Brian, right? Because you didn't like him?" "Yes," her father said honestly. "I didn't trust him." "I see. Okay, Daddy, I'll find out and tell you." Maya found a place, researched everything, and calculated the funds needed. Maya's father's savings covered only half the amount, and she told him they would need to take out a loan. "Are you ready to risk it?" "You know, I'm tired of being afraid of bad luck," Maya said cheerfully, "and I found loans with favourable interest rates for small businesses. If everything goes as planned, I can easily pay it back, maybe even before the deadline." "I believe in you, my dear. You will definitely succeed," her father said. For the next few weeks, Maya dealt with paperwork and prepared the room for business. She rented equipment, bought groceries and set everything up. She set up a small shop window to sell some items locally. The location was convenient, near a university, offices, and residential neighbourhoods. To her great surprise, the business quickly took off. Past clients, learning that Maya was opening a pastry shop, came for cakes, cupcakes and cookies. It's been 2 years. During this time, Maya opened 2 confectionery shops and 2 small kiosks with fresh baked goods. In addition to sweets, they baked baguettes, loaves, and puffs with savoury fillings. Maya's father was proud of her. "You see, luck loves you. You're doing great." "Daddy, I've got a surprise for you. I bought you a trip to a cool sanatorium," Maya said to her father. Seeing his attempt to object, she added quickly, "No objections. You're going and that's final. You need to improve your health. I can afford it now and send you to rest. The place is gorgeous. You'll love it and want to go again." "For how long?" asked the man, resigned. 24 days. And don't make a face like I'm forcing you to eat semolina. You're an adult. You must realize that at your age, you'd need to take special care of your health. So think about what books to buy so you won't be bored. You have 2 days to pack." "Yes, sir," father said jokingly and raised his hand to his head, saluting like a soldier.
Well done. The next day, Ainsley called. Well, hello, business lady. Won't you treat an old friend to a piece of delicious cake? Hi, Ainsley, I'm a bit busy, to be honest. Let me send Dad to the sanatorium tomorrow, and we can meet tonight. OK, let's go to Deja Vu then, Ainsley suggested. Why? I don't know that place. Oh, it's a new restaurant that opened a couple of months ago. It's excellent. Shall we book a table? Book it for 8 p.m. tomorrow. I can't make it earlier. Great. See you tomorrow then. The next day, in the morning, Maya helped her father pack and took him to the train station. Taking her father's word to follow all the procedures and not to come home early, Maya sent him off to rest. She had many things planned for the day and was still busy until evening. While driving and talking on the phone, she didn't notice and cut off another car. The problem was, the car was costly, which meant big trouble. The driver jumped out shouting, "Where did you buy your license, you moron?" and strode determinedly toward Maya's car. Maya shrank back, anticipating the confrontation, and rolled down the window a little. Seeing that the culprit of the accident was a woman, the first driver stopped, looked carefully at Maya and suddenly asked, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Maya replied in surprise and got out of the car. "I didn't scratch your car, did I?" "No, I managed to slow down in time. Good reaction, but you shouldn't drive like that, or you could have an accident." "I'm sorry. I don't usually drive like this. It's just a hectic day." "All right then. Have a good day and good luck on the road," the man said and walked towards his car. "Wait!" Maya caught up with the man and handed him her business card. "Here, take it. You'll get a 30% discount on any order as compensation." The man took the business card and asked in surprise, "So this is your pastry shop?" "Yes, it is," Ainsley said, and extended her hand for a handshake. The stranger smiled and took her hand. "Stephen Ryback, restaurateur." "A colleague, then," Maya smiled. At that moment, Stephen's phone rang. Yes, I'm on my way, literally 5 minutes," he said to someone on the phone, and then to Maya, "Sorry, I'm rushing. I'll definitely come for the cake. They're great, I've tasted them." He got into the car and drove away. Maya watched him leave and thought that for the first time in her life, she was glad for her inattention. She met a colleague, a very handsome colleague. Stephen was about the same height as Maya, but athletic and very attractive. She even smiled at her thoughts, thinking of a man as interesting for the first time since her divorce. Yes, I clearly lack a personal life, or rather, it is completely absent, thought Maya, and smiled again. In the evening, she arrived at the Deja Vu restaurant a little late. Ainsley was already waiting for her at the table. "You're late." "I'm sorry. I've had a hectic day. I sent my dad to a sanatorium in the morning, then I had a small accident, then the tax office, then the suppliers. I just got off work. I haven't even had an opportunity to change," Maya ranted. "OK, stop, dear. Have a glass of champagne and relax. You're speaking like a hunted horse. Tell me, is your dad glad about the trip? And what about the accident? Nobody was hurt." "You know my dad. He is not overexcited, but he went. I hope he likes it there. The place is gorgeous." Maya drank champagne and slowly relaxed. "And the accident, it was nothing special. I didn't notice the car on the turn. Everyone is alive and unharmed, even the cars. But the driver was so handsome." Maya rolled her eyes dreamily. "That's interesting. Tell me about it." "Oh, Ainsley, I think I urgently need a man, or I'll soon be throwing myself at passers-by. And by the way, he is in the restaurant business. I didn't ask what kind of restaurant." "Oh, come on." "Yes, he just got a phone call and left quickly, but I gave him my business card and he promised to come back for the cake." "That's already good. Let's hope he will come soon." Ainsley smiled. The women placed the order, drank champagne and chatted merrily. Both were in a great mood. Suddenly, Maya heard behind her, "You haven't crashed my car, so you decided to continue at my restaurant." Maya turned around and saw Stephen standing behind her. "Oh, good evening. Is this your restaurant?" "Actually, it's mine. Is something wrong? Any complaints about the service?" Stephen asked in a hostess manner. No, everything is fine," Maya smiled. "Wonderful. You know, I just saw a familiar hooligan, and that's why I decided to ask how things were going. Since everything's fine for her, then rest up. Have a nice evening." "Perhaps you'd like to join us?" Maya asked, surprised at herself. "Maybe, but a little later." Stephen smiled and stepped away from the table. "I take it this handsome guy is the driver you almost crushed today," Ainsley said. "And I understand you, though he's really handsome. If I were you, I'd turn on all my charm and try to charm him." "What if he's married? He's well into his 30s. "I'd say he's into his 40s, but you can flirt and find out if he's married or not." Then their orders arrived and the women began to eat. The food was excellent indeed. After finishing the main course, Maya and Ainsley continued to chat and joke. Both were in a great mood. The waitress came over and placed another bottle of champagne and a plate of fruit on the table. "We didn't order any more champagne," Ainsley said calmly. "It's on the house." The waitress smiled and placed a third glass on the table. Maya began to worry. She realized that Stephen would be joining them now, but she had already drunk a little, relaxed, and was not coordinating her words well. "Ainsley, don't leave me with him," she begged her friend. "But you really need to relax." "Well, Ainsley, are you my friend or his?" "Yours, of course, but—" She didn't finish because Stephen pulled up a chair and sat down next to the women. Maya was shaking inside with excitement. There was some incredible, tantalizing smell coming from Stephen. After about 10 minutes, Ainsley apologized and said she urgently needed to leave. Maya almost shrieked with indignation, pleading with her eyes not to leave her alone with Stephen. But Ainsley was adamant. Leaving, she leaned over to Maya and said quietly, "I am your friend. That's why I'm leaving you two alone. Have a good evening and call me tomorrow." Maya was afraid to be alone with Stephen. She and Ainsley drank a bottle of champagne between them, but for non-drinking Maya it was too much, plus a glass from the second bottle. Meanwhile, the champagne did its job, and Maya started to say, "Stephen, may I ask you a question? Just answer honestly, please." "Of course. I always answer honestly." Stephen smiled as he watched Maya getting drunker before his eyes. "Are you married?" "No, I never have been." "Why is that? Are you against an official relationship?" "No, just didn't have time at first. And now I'm actively searching for a soulmate, but so far unsuccessful." He kept smiling. He definitely liked Maya, especially now that she was in such a relaxed state and not trying to keep up appearances. "What about you? Are you married?" He touched her arm, and it was as if Maya had been electrocuted. She was already struggling to hold herself together, and here was such a gentle touch. Maya turned her whole body toward Stephen and looked into his eyes. "I'm about to do something I'll be terribly ashamed of tomorrow, but I'm going to do it anyway." She leaned down and kissed him first. He responded. Maya was already dizzy, and now her legs were no longer obeying her as well. "Walk me home," she said quietly to Stephen. "With pleasure." Maya woke up and looked around. Where was she? This was definitely not her apartment. She was sleeping on a huge bed covered with a plaid blanket. "Oh no, what a nightmare! What have I done?" echoed in her head. The door opened and Stephen entered the room with a tray in his hands. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty," he smiled. Why Sleeping Beauty? Maya didn't understand.
Because you said so yesterday. You're Sleeping Beauty, and I woke you up with a kiss like a real prince. Oh, I'm ready to fall through the ground now, admitted the woman. Then you'll have to take me with you. Why? Because I now know exactly who my soulmate is. Stephen smiled again and winked at Maya, embarrassing her more. I'm sorry. I'm really embarrassed. I don't drink at all. It's all Ainsley's fault. She said to me, you need to relax, have some champagne. What a nightmare. So, that's who I should thank. Your friend and the champagne, laughed Stephen. You're having fun, aren't you? I'm ready to fall through the ground and you're having fun? Stephen set the coffee and breakfast tray aside and sat down next to her. I know what I need to do to make you not want to fall through the ground any more, he said, and kissed Maya. Stephen was an incredible man. Maya used to think Brian was the best, and now she realized that Stephen was the man of her dreams, and she didn't want to go anywhere from here. A week later, Maya moved her things and the cat to Stephen's place. They started living together. Stephen was busy with his 4 restaurants, and Maya with her pastry shop. They were preparing for the wedding. By the time Maya's father returned from the sanatorium, they had already applied for the wedding. Maya's father immediately liked his daughter's fiancé. Stephen was so polite, cultured, educated, and intelligent that he couldn't help but charm his future father-in-law. You see, daughter, everything is fine with you. A decent husband and a successful business. So now, I don't worry about the life ahead of you. Yes, Daddy, you were right. Maya and Stephen were preparing for the wedding. There was just under a week to go. Today, Maya had to pick up her dress from the salon. She got into the car and was about to go when the phone rang. Without looking at the screen, Maya answered. Hello? She heard a familiar voice and could not believe her own ears. It was Brian. Hi, Brian, are you on business? I just don't have much time, so talk fast, Maya said. We need to meet. We? I don't need to. Please, can you please make time for me? Maya hesitated. I'll be near Central Park in 2 hours. If it's convenient, let's meet there. Yeah, okay, I'll be there, thanks. Maya picked up her dress and drove to downtown. There she had another meeting about organising the wedding. After chatting with the organiser, she drove up to the park. Brian was standing at the entrance, apparently afraid to let Maya pass. She got out of the car and walked over to him. Brian looked at his ex-wife and marvelled at how much she had changed. You look wonderful, he said. Thank you. Let's make this quick, I really don't have much time. Maya, I wanted to apologise to you for real. I'm so guilty. I just now realised what an idiot I was. Brian, I accept your apology, and I don't resent you. It's been a long time coming. It's just the way it is. It's an experience. Things didn't work out with Rochelle. I left her 6 months ago. She's different, not like you. You're sincere, caring and real. She's selfish. Sorry for you. What do you want from me? I want you to come back to me. I regretted every day that I did that to you. It's like my mind went blank because of Rochelle. Forgive me and come back. Maya looked at her ex-husband in surprise. That strange woman with the beads was right about everything, even that. Brian, I'm not coming back to you. Not because I'm happy with another man, but because you're not my man. You're my unfortunate past, and I have a happy future ahead of me. I'll tell you something else. I'm not your woman. You were just comfortable and convenient with me, but you never loved me. You will definitely meet another woman, but it's definitely not me. Goodbye. Maya turned around and went to her car. She drove to her happy future with a calm heart.
There was no resentment towards Brian. She had let him go back then, on the day of their divorce, and she didn't remember it anymore, nor did she want to. She picked up her cell phone and dialed Stephen. "Where are you?" she asked. "In Deja Vu. What's wrong?" Stephen sounded excited. "I'll be right in 5 minutes." "Okay," said Stephen fearfully. Maya drove up to the restaurant, where her fiancé was already waiting for her. "Maya, what's wrong?" Maya walked over and kissed her lover. "Nothing. I just wanted to kiss you urgently." "Well, that's good then. Don't scare me like that anymore. I thought there was a problem." "Don't worry, we'll be fine. I know it for sure." Maya didn't know yet that very soon there would be another event in her life that would make her absolutely happy, and doubly so. Maya would have twins, a boy and a girl. But that would come later, after the wedding.